shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, and another swelteringly hot day. I'm hearing people today in the broadcasting saying it's the hottest day of the year. I mean, normally you would expect as the year goes on at this stage of the year, it would be the hottest day of the year. But yeah, it's certainly unusually hot for May Day, but very happy May Day to you. And let's hope you're enjoying a little bit of the sunshine ahead of the bank holiday, when, of course, it's going to start raining again. I keep pointing this out, but just because that's, British way. But there we are. Lots to talk about today, including Labour's biggest union backer, that's Unite Union, attacking the net zero policy of the government, warning that it's set to become a political millstone around the party's neck amid growing unrest over the green agenda. Keir Starmer failed to guarantee net zero Secretary Ed Miliband's job yesterday. Meanwhile, Norway's energy minister has said the country will never turn their back on the North Sea and the oil they've got there, just as Britain has very stupidly done in a rebuke to Labour's net zero pledges, bearing in mind that the Conservatives did much of the same as well. Meanwhile, the latest madness in our asylum policy, a Ghanaian asylum seeker has won a human rights claim to remain in the UK after arguing that he is too traumatised by getting COVID to return to his home country. You cannot make this stuff up. Every single day there is a new story like this. These are not one-offs. This is now the norm. Plus, in breaking news late last night, the United States and Ukraine signed a minerals deal after weeks of negotiations, very different from the deal that was first mooted. The deal will allow the US to exploit Ukraine's natural resources, with the Trump administration saying Russia would see it as a signal that Washington is committed to supporting a free Ukraine. But very crucially, it's not about paying debts back to the US, and Ukraine still maintains control and ownership of all of those minerals. We'll get the latest on that in a couple of moments. Plus, the director of the Muslim Association of Britain is under fire for saying that the October 7th massacre was a lie. Quite a bizarre claim, given that most of the evidence, the October the 7th massacre in Israel, actually comes from the body cams of Hamas fighters and terrorists who actually put it up online themselves, what they had done. Anas Al-Tikriti is a former president of the group, and he described taking hostages as a very important part of the Hamas resistance. These people walk and live amongst us and they hold these views. Should they? We'll talk about all of that coming up. Plenty more besides, including the usual nonsense of these Harry Potter stars, the latest lot of them turning against J.K. Rowling, who's made them all a fortune and made them famous for her views on trans people. In fact, they're just views on women. But we'll also talk about actually some breaking news in the last few moments that the Football Association in the UK, well, in England, has changed its long-standing so-called inclusion policy on trans women, i.e. misogynistic policy against women on their footballers, and trans women, i.e. men, will be banned from playing in the women's game in England from next season. They'll be banned from playing because they're not women, which is why they shouldn't be playing in the women's game. It's very, very simple. Thank goodness for that Supreme Court ruling. But the FA until now had continued to allow men who claimed to be trans women to play in the women's teams on a case-by-case basis. It was all about reducing their testosterone levels, even though, of course, no man can reduce his testosterone level to anything close to that of a woman, which is why it was always dangerous for men and boys to be playing against girls after they've gone through puberty. So there we are. Some more sanity coming, although there's an awful lot of organisations, bodies still trying to fight the reality of that Supreme Court ruling, and we'll be talking to James Essis about that later in the show. So much to talk about, and all of the chat, I'm delighted to say today, will be with former Senior Military Intelligence Officer Philip Ingram MBE, who joins us. Very good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Isn't the weather wonderful?
We've been saying this all week. Climate change. No, because we're not that show. We've been saying all week just how the difference it makes to us. Yeah. However, if we did have weather like this, we would be a happier, much happier country, but we wouldn't be British, you see. Yeah, I think moaning about the weather and genuinely being a bit morose and whinging and sarcasm, I think all of that comes from not living in a beautiful sun-soaked country. I'm sorry, I think that's quite crucial to our psyche.
I think the Brits have taken moaning about the weather to the next level, because as soon as the sun comes out,
we moan about that.
Oh, we moan about it's too hot, it's too hot, it's terrible.
No, it is too hot.
It's a heat wave. It's a heat wave. There'll be a hosepipe ban. It's terrible. Yeah. We need. I'm
amazed. Yeah. I live in Thames Water. We normally have a hosepipe ban, even when there is actually flooding in the street. No hosepipe ban. It's all right. No thanks. We're good. We're still being flooded from the last storm. Yeah. Thanks very much.
No, I want to enjoy it.
It's only a matter of time. Oh no, totally going to enjoy. Absolutely going to enjoy it. But yeah, and let's enjoy the chat for today. Local elections today, Runcorn by-election today. So of course, as of 7 a.m. this morning, we can't talk about any local politics or what's going on there. Don't forget, of course, Mike Graham be here with you tomorrow. Alex Phillips as well. Mm-hmm. Also to talk about these election results. Get the Runcorn by-election result in the morning, and local elections coming throughout the day. No doubt, lots of talk about that. But what we can talk about today is what is going on here. Trade unions rejected, basically, green lunacy, as many would say. By the way, on many different political parties, this isn't a party political issue. The Unite Union, major backer, the biggest backer of the unions backing Labour, they have won the net zero plan is a millstone, a political millstone around the neck of Labour, and they basically, it's all about job losses, and the fears basically they're not creating new jobs. This comes after the GMB union described the energy policy as bonkers, but the Unite General Secretary Sharon Graham, we normally see her talking about bin collectors in Birmingham, but she said Unite is not against net zero. Everyone always says that. It's like Tony Blair, not against net zero, but it will not be achieved without serious investment in new jobs. Unite has warned time after time that all the rhetoric about a joined up industrial strategy and future jobs must be backed up with serious investment that actually delivers. What is Labour waiting for? The time is to act now. If they fail to do this, then Labour cannot expect workers to support their net zero plan. The General Secretary, Gary Smith of GMB, said it was absolute madness to be cutting off investment in North Sea oil and gas, one of a growing sense of betrayal. The criticisms we've had from Tony Blair in that foreword he wrote to a Tony Blair Institute, I want my own institute. It's an institute report, very, very damning about, look, it's unachievable, it's not going to work. Do you think this is the beginning of the end of net zero as a policy? I mean, even Kemi Baden of the Tories has dropped it as the 2050 target.
I think it's the beginning of a reset rather than the end. I don't think it's going to go away completely because
they're so signed up to it.
And it's signed up to on a global basis. So the talk's not going to go away, but they're rolling back on it. And whenever we get the unions we get Tony Blair turning on Ed Milliwatt. We get the unions now turning on Ed Milliwatt. I don't think Milliwatt has got much time left in government.
This is my thing, because I mean, a lot of people haven't got much time for him. But the trouble is, people always talk about this is Ed Miliband's policy. It's not. It's the Labour official
it's the Labour
policy. It was
yes.
also the Conservative Party policy, the Lib Dem policy, the
Yeah.
Green policy. Wasn't Reform policy, but it was absolutely national policy of the Labour Party. Keir Starmer wrote the manifesto. Well, approved the manifesto. It was his people who wrote it. He appointed Ed Miliband. If there is a policy in any government, it is the Prime Minister who allows that. But no, the idea that the Energy Secretary pushes his own policy is absolute abject nonsense in centralised government.
No, but Ed Miliband did come out and guarantee, what was it, £13.6 billion for overseas green projects within the first week
but
or
again,
so.
Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has to approve that.
But again, then we look at the overall policy, and yes, it was the Labour Party's policy, but Rachel Reeves' policy or drive is to try and achieve growth. Nobody with any common sense said if you follow these green targets are you going to get growth, and therefore they were shooting themselves in the foot before they'd even started. They hadn't thought about it. That's quite simple.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, no one's thought through these policies. If you pay the slightest bit of attention, you'll know this is absolutely load of nonsense. Now, it's very interesting yesterday that Number 10 refused to guarantee Ed Miliband's job. Basically, whenever, and we've had this about Rachel Reeves, and whenever a Prime Minister or their Number 10 spokesman for any party is asked, will you guarantee that this person will still be in their job by X or Y? Look, they've got the Prime Ministers can get rid of somebody at a drop of a hat. They are first among equals. They get to decide this. But there's no doubt at all that failure to give that support is a bit of a nod and a wink. I mean, Ed Miliband is on borrowed time. There's no doubt at all to me, and I've been saying this, I witted on about this yesterday as well, that none of these net zero policies, whether it's boilers and heat pumps, whether it's EV cars, whether it's some of the solar panel policies, whether it's the 2030, now it was 100%, now it's a 95% electricity to be produced from renewables. None of this stuff survives contact with reality.
Yep.
None of it's achievable. We will have blackouts. People will not put up with it. People simply will not buy cars they don't want.
Yep.
They will not have heat pumps installed into their homes because they don't work and they cost a fortune and they take up more space and they simply don't heat your home properly. People will not do this stuff. People will vote on this stuff. And at the end of the day, this stuff doesn't happen. It's just a question of how soon people just come to the reality of this.
Well, I think people are getting the reality of it, and if we've got the unions turning around saying it, that's shocking. We've got the unions coming out with common sense.
They were seeing those GMB in particular. They were seeing those oil jobs going in Scotland very, very early on and going, hold on a minute. These are highly paid, highly skilled workers.
But the people that seem to come to the common sense table last are the politicians who are making the decisions.
Yeah.
And this is the trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Call us, as you know, on any of the topics we're talking about. If you can get wipe the suntan lotion off your hands while you're working from home. Wink, wink.
Put the G&T down.
And put the G&T a bit early, even for us, 10:30.
Pims then.
Pims. Put down the Pims. And give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Labour's biggest union backers have attacked the government's net zero energy policies, particularly over job losses. What is your reaction? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one network standard network rate message. Of course, it's free on X and it's free on our YouTube page as well. Let's also talk about your big area of expertise in terms of military intelligence and security, Philip Ingram. Let's talk about this US-Ukraine mineral deal. Long on the cards, demanded by the president. We thought it was going to be signed way back, what was it, February, when Zelensky was in the White House and the Oval Office, and we had that horrific humiliation of Zelensky by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and others. That deal fell off. He was basically thrown out of the White House. After that meeting at the Vatican last weekend, it seems that things have moved rather quickly. Tell us what this mineral deal actually involves.
Well, it's not actually a mineral deal. Minerals are part of it. It's a US-Ukrainian reconstruction investment fund. And as part
rolls off the tongue.
Exactly. As part of that investment fund, it's giving US preferential access to the rare earth metals and the minerals that are on the Ukraine soil.
They're not the biggest, the country with the biggest set of resources there, but
it's not. But rare earth metals are quite important to the United States in particular, and for defence, because China owns about 90% of the global economic output.
Most of the minerals and the oil and the gas and everything that they do have is in the east of the country.
Yes.
Quite a lot of it is in the Donbass region, which is currently controlled by Russia.
A large proportion of it is. But
small problem there?
There is a small problem there, and and this is where there's a lot more going to come out of this. And I think there will be, whilst there's no direct security guarantees within it, there will be implied security guarantees that will come, because Donald Trump won't want his investment that he's invested so much public capital in being harmed by the ongoing conflict. But putting the rare earth metals in context, Ukraine's got about 5% of the world's stocks. It's got about a third of Europe's lithium. Now, lithium is important for all of the batteries that we have in all our EV stuff and everything else that's out there. But most of it's in the ground. It hasn't been exploited. It's not in active mines at the moment.
This takes years.
It's going to need a lot of investment to come in and do that.
But the crucial thing about this is this isn't anything close to the deal that Trump was originally talking about, which is you basically need to give us, forever rights to your minerals in return for the fact that we've given you loads of money. I think he was quoted with some sort of $350 million.
$350 billion.
Billion. I mean, completely, of course, billion, not million. Completely made up sums about how much money the US had contributed, and comparisons with the EU and the rest of Europe. But also this idea that again that they'd have ownership of it. That's not what this deal is. Ukraine maintains ownership, control, and the first 10 years of any of the profits go to Ukraine for rebuilding and reconstruction.
And it includes oil and gas as well, because there's those resources under Ukraine. But it also then means that the split is 50-50. So the US are going to try and help get investment to develop the mines and develop the capability to bring this out. So this is win-win for both sides.
Why would Trump agree to this, given what, again, Mr. Art of the Deal, such a great deal maker? I mean, do you think just Donald Trump doesn't really know the details and his guys just wanted to get this over the line as a precursor to some sort of security guarantee? Because there is no security guarantee here, and we were always told Zelensky wouldn't sign anything without the security guarantee.
There isn't a direct security guarantee. I think there's an implied security guarantee. It makes it... and this is, I'm going to contradict myself here, it makes it more difficult for Russia to attack facilities that are jointly controlled by US and Ukraine. However, back in 2022, when Putin invaded Ukraine, he didn't care about attacking companies that were US owned in doing that. But in Trump's mind, it will give that level of security guarantee. And I have seen some reporting, which I haven't been able to confirm, that as part of this, the United States has suggested that they will continue to provide air defense support. And that's one of the big things that Ukraine needs at the moment. But it puts... I think Zelensky's got a good deal out of it. I think Donald Trump can go tick, deal done, and Vladimir Putin's going to be sitting there going, hang on, this isn't going the way that I want it to go.
Yes.
So we need to see what Putin's next move is.
Yeah, that's was going to be my next question. How will Putin be seeing this? Because I'm still quite surprised that he, that authorised the bombing of civilians in Kyiv, because he rather undermined, the Putin Trump narrative that somehow Zelensky was already the wrong and Putin wasn't the problem.
Putin's not playing the game well at all from his perspective. The US came up with a peace deal that effectively gave Putin everything that he wanted. Putin, instead of accepting that and backing it and saying, yes, we'll do it and sign for it and we'll go for a 30-hour or we'll go for a 30-day ceasefire, then turned around with further demands only a few days ago, asking for even more and effectively throwing Donald Trump's peace plan back in his face. And then we get yesterday Peskov, who's Putin's spokesperson, going out and saying that the United States is not going to see peace in the time frame that Donald Trump wants.
Indeed.
That's again throwing it in his face once more. So they're not playing Donald Trump well.
What do you make of the idea that the trade deal with the UK has been on the back burner amid US warnings that Starmer's sort of attempt to sort of reset with Brexit will basically make it hard? If we're going to align with a load of EU rules, the whole point of leaving the EU was that we wouldn't have to align with a lot of these rules, which are they benefit either Germany or France or Spain. They don't benefit us and our manufacturers or our agricultural producers. But we were speaking to Seb Walker, a senior advisor to the White House, and he suggested that we tried to narrow it down, that we're somewhere in the top 10 in the queue for getting a trade deal. But if it goes in the back burner, I mean, how vital is that trade deal? I mean, more vital now we've got those 10% tariffs, but we're not facing 145% like China.
It is vital, but it shows the naivety, possibly the naivety of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. Keir Starmer said it was really important, and Rachel Reeves put a lot of effort into trying to get the deal with the United States. But then both of them come out to say they're going for this reset with the EU and getting closer ties, and they must have known that Donald Trump is very anti-EU from a trade perspective.
Yeah.
But then Rachel Reeves turned around and said, the EU is our bigger trading partner, so we want to be closer to them. That is another red rag to Donald Trump.
It's not an expanding economy.
No.
Yeah, it's absolute madness, isn't it? And I love the fact they always talk about they're afraid for free trade. The EU is not a free trading organisation. It's a customs union. They have free trade within it, and they impose massive tariffs outside it. That's not a free trade organisation.
And when we were part of the EU, I was working for a steel company in the UK, and we were competing against European steel companies, and we were all having to apply the same rules. We could not compete with them because they interpreted the rules in a different way. That's all I'll say from a legal perspective.
I just want to get to you just one other story. It has emerged this morning that the Metropolitan Police, the counter-terrorism police, are going to investigate online videos. There's a lot of allegedly showing Northern Irish rap trio Kneecap calling. I mean, they did show. I mean, I'm sorry,
yes,
they did show the death, calling for the death of British MPs. Kill your MP was what they said on video, and shouting up Hamas, up Hezbollah, inciting violence against a group of people, by the way, 2 of whom have been murdered in the last 10 years, and also supporting 2 prescribed terrorist organisations. I find it extraordinary it's taken them this long. I mean, if they'd written a hurty tweet, they would already have been investigated and be in the police cells.
Well, yeah, well, poor Lucy Connolly, the 42-year-old mother who put a tweet out saying that Asylum Hotel should be.
I mean, it was an absolutely foul, horrible tweet.
It was foul and horrible, but listening to the comments that have come out from Kneecap, and Kneecap, the name of the band, and that wearing that, I cannot.
Oh, they're all the big I am, aren't they?
I cannot describe to you the blood-curdling horror of hearing the screams of someone being kneecapped by terrorist organisations. It never leaves you. And then for them to support.
But they're from Belfast.
And they're from Belfast. But only one of them was born before the Good Friday Agreement. So their parents and society has pushed them along this path where they just don't understand what went on beforehand. And they clearly don't understand Hezbollah. Hezbollah is one of the biggest criminal organisations in the Middle East, with child sex trafficking, people trafficking, money laundering, drug supply, as well as the terrorism. And they train most other terrorists around the world.
Yeah.
So
let's pick them up, and let's pick them up because we're all cool, aren't we? Again, nice to see the police actually investigating something we should be worried about.
Exactly, and just because they are in the public eye doesn't mean they're exempt. And this is all these people that are coming out to support them should be looking at themselves and recognising.
But it's a free speech issue. No, freedom of speech doesn't include inciting people to murder.
No,
it really doesn't. Thank you very much, Philip Ingram. Plenty more coming from him. Up next, get to your calls. I'd love to hear from you on all the topics we're talking about, particularly Labour's biggest union backers, basically turning them over net zero policies. Is it the beginning of the end for net zero? Fingers crossed, everybody. The number to call 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
there's a vociferous section of other communities that think the IOPC isn't anti-police. They think actually they're pro-police, and that's why they never prosecute anyone, successfully prosecute anyone.
Yes.
So the IOPC are desperate to convince certain communities, and you know, Chris Cabba would be part of one of the communities I'm talking about, and go, look, you know, we've got to establish that, you know, we're on their side and we're going to take this to the nth degree.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:26 is the time. Philip Ingram's still with me. Let's get straight to your phone calls and your messages coming in, particularly about Labour's biggest union backers. This time it's Unite. G&B Union have also already criticised the government over net zero energy policies. Particularly this is over job losses. They're not querying all the net zero. Well, I mean, I would say utter nonsense, but they're saying, well, you know, but it's costing jobs and you're not replacing those jobs. Remember that green energy revolution? I think weren't there going to be 500,000 new green jobs? Where are they coming from? Because it seems to me they're all coming from China. They're the ones who are building all the solar panels and the wind turbines. Let's get some of your texts and tweets coming in about this. What your reaction is to this news? Mark says Mad Ed needs to go on gardening leave. Nancy says Unite waking up to the fact they will have an awful lot less members if we carry on with net zero insanity. Evan says too little too late. I could not be any more disillusioned with our so-called democracy than I already am. Karen says the far left eco-con is coming apart at the seams. Michael says shows how out of touch and damaging the unions have been in the past. And Samuel says, are we really surprised? Time for Red Ed to go. Maybe time to scrap the role of net zero secretary altogether. Well, I mean, those job titles change an awful lot, don't they? But I've certainly always queried with former Conservatives in the job when they were, you know, Grant Shapps and others. There was sort of energy security and net zero secretary. Which one, Philip? Because there's energy security and there's net zero. They are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, but that was an excuse for achieving nothing.
Yeah.
They cancelled each other out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of most government ministers from most parties, isn't it? Let's go to the phone line. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Ray is on the line in Colchester. Very good morning to you, Ray. What's the weather like there?
The weather is absolutely fantastic, but unfortunately I still find myself in the madhouse that is the once Great Britain, led by lunatics, and the top lunatic in this particular shambles is, I'm afraid, Mad Ed Miliband, who is, I'm afraid, a complete fanatic in that. But to be fair, as the wheels merrily come off of this great plan to impoverish us all, as we head towards the edge of a cliff which is approaching us very quickly, I've seen this many times before. An idea is put forward, everybody signs up to it. Very quickly, they start to realise the actual realities. But you know what? Let's chuck so much more money at it because we can definitely make it work.
Yeah, but also you can't backtrack on it. But this is the same as lockdown policies. Again, we had a policy to deal with the event of a pandemic, and then we just threw it out the window. China did a lockdown and went, oh well, we should try lockdowns. I mean, no one did a cost-benefit analysis. I spent 2 years saying, can we have a cost-benefit analysis as policy? When there was a cost-benefit analysis done after the fact of it, after net zero was put into law under Theresa May's government by Philip Hammond, one useful thing that absolutely god-awful useless Tory Chancellor ever did. They said it was going to cost trillions, and it's just sort of like, what a surprise.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, the only hope now is that certainly what happened in Portugal, Spain, is really it's going to happen here. It's going to happen here. But the reason why that story is not still dominating the news is because it's a problem with renewable and reliance on renewables. So BBC, Sky and ITV, they got bored with it very quickly. Didn't you notice? Oh yeah, of course. I mean, listen, you can tell anything that's outside of the narrative gets buried incredibly quickly. But that doesn't stop reality. You can deny reality. Yeah. You can rage against it. You can say it isn't so. But reality is there, and it's heading our way. And we can all see it. The ordinary person who is being absolutely impoverished by these mad things they put in place, they can see where this is heading. I mean, people at the top who are never affected by this will move effortlessly onward, leaving behind them a trail of destruction in this country. Not only social destruction, where people are absolutely in penury and in poverty, but complete economic destruction, because we are destroying the very foundation of every Western economy.
And impacting our ability to defend ourselves as well. This is so crucial. It's social cohesion in terms of people being able to afford the basics. It's the economic. Governments used to be elected to try and improve our lot, not to make us poorer. Net zero policies, they're explicitly laid out what needs to be done to achieve these policies. The Climate Change Committee, people appointed by government ministers, Tory, Labour, over the years, they are very explicit about the changes to our lifestyle and the limits to our freedoms that would be required. So they wouldn't ban us from flying more than once a year. You just wouldn't be able to afford to fly more than once a year. They want to put that control on us to achieve a policy which will achieve absolutely, quite literally, zero.
Yeah, and the point is that this fundamentally is, and you just mentioned the word, this is about control. This is about absolute control of the individual of every aspect of their life.
This is why I disagree. Where this moves into the conspiracy, the idea that it's all a big cunning wheeze, like lockdown was and things like. I think it's just abjectly incompetent, ignorant, idiot politicians from all parties.
Well, I think that there's truth in that, because unfortunately it is. However, I think there is something we've now got the technology to be under surveillance 24 hours a day. You have a bunch of people who, by the very nature of politicians, tend to be certain sociopaths and maniacs because they want control. That's what they want. They should be free from being politicians by the very fact that they want to be politicians and that. But this mess, I'm afraid, is not going to end even with Miliband being sidelined. No. And there's too many fanatics in it.
There are. I mean, there's too much money in it. I mean, this is a very lucrative business, being green. Ray, really interesting call. Thank you very much, Ray in Colchester. Philip Ingram, I know you're itching to come back very briefly on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that Ray was saying. Yes,
including the sort of the control aspect.
Well, the control aspect, to a degree, I think that's what they aspire to. But to
they know better.
To have control, you need to have some form of competent planning behind it, and that doesn't, as you said, that doesn't exist. Somewhere in between.
Trust me, I've met these people. They're not capable of a conspiracy. Trust me, these people can barely tie their own shoelaces.
Yeah, but they do aspire to control.
Yeah, okay. 10:32 is the time. Up next, well, we'll ask Baroness Kate Hoey about that. She's an independent peer, former Labour MP. We'll talk to her about all things political. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me as well. Delighted to be joined now by Baroness Hoey, independent peer, former Labour MP. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much. Well, of course, we can't talk about local elections, by-elections, anything else happening today. We are in a purdah period until those polls close at 10 o'clock tonight. But we can talk general politics and where we are generally. Just wondering what you made of these trade unions. Latest one is the Unite trade union after the GMB as well, and others have criticised net zero policies. They all sort of say they're signed up to net zero. Everyone actually goes through those motions, even Tony Blair does. But they're saying, look, when we are seeing job losses, we're not seeing those jobs protected. This is a policy that the Unite Union are saying is going to be a millstone around Labour's neck. I mean, it's been a millstone around the neck of every government, has it not?
Yeah. Well, I think, Julia, this will be a catalyst now to. I know there's been sort of rumours that Ed Miliband might go. I think this will actually help to ensure that will happen at the first.
But why does everyone think this is down to him? And look, he's definitely a zealot on this. But this is stuff that was put in the manifesto by Keir Starmer.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I mean, I was going on to say that getting rid of Ed Miliband won't change fundamentally the Labour Party's obsession with net zero, but what it will do in terms of Labour kind of attitude to Labour will be that people will think, oh, the government has acted. They've got rid of the zealot, because he is a zealot, and some of the things he's done, I think the Labour Party will, after these elections, will want to roll back on. But I think the union's saying that. I mean, obviously, the union's first priority is to protect jobs. Everything that is happening is losing jobs, and they know that. Maybe not just today, but in the longer term. He goes on, the government goes on about how many more jobs are going to be created by all the different green energies. Yeah. It's just not reality, and they know that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It's just not happening, and we can see that it's just not happening, and everyone else can see it's just not happening. And other countries are gradually throwing this by the wayside. And certainly, Donald Trump in America sort of saying, "Look, drill, baby, drill." Even Norwegian minister saying, basically, we will never sort of reject North Sea oil like you've done. Norway's they've got loads of renewable energy. They're absolutely. I mean, we get a load of our electricity from them, for goodness sake. But they've got this amazing wealth fund which they've created using North Sea oil funds, which we foolishly did not do in this country to set that up for future generations. But they're just like, you are crazy to walk away from that supply of oil and gas.
I thought it was particularly interesting, given that they actually benefit from us having got rid of our oil and gas in terms of buying more from them. I thought it was very interesting that Norway had enough sense to say, what we're doing is just something that they couldn't possibly imagine doing. Yeah. And so, I think there's one announcement today that I suppose is seen as a sort of green thing, but actually I've no objection to, and that's the idea that every house that's being built, in terms of any kind of government funding, should have solar panels. Yeah. If that's possible, because that could be quite useful. Although again, while we're all sitting here in the sun at the moment, that's not going to last.
So, all very well. Yeah, exactly. Not even last till Monday, apparently. Exactly. But that's the thing, isn't it? Now, let's also talk about just another bit of breaking news. Now, you're a former sports minister yourself. The Football Association in England has announced that as of next season, they're going to be banning, they say, trans women players from the women's game. What they mean is men identifying as trans in the women's game. This is something to be welcomed, isn't it?
Oh, this is the best news today, frankly. I mean, it had to come after the Supreme Court ruling. But I mean, the FA has been very, very bad on this. They're one of the governing bodies that just refuse to sort of move, despite the local knowledge about some small amateur football clubs, women's teams, where a man basically came along, said he was a woman, wanted to play in it, and then other women players were put off, or were frightened, or were worried about their the health issue of a stronger man, and the FA really just kind of said, oh no, we're just we have to be inclusive, we're going to look at each. So I think this is a really important step forward, and I think the attitude of the Olympic movement will be very important too on this, so that we really do find that it can't happen in any...
I mean, so the World Athletics have been pretty solid on this. Seb Coe was obviously one of the candidates for the IOC leadership. It's interesting, of course, with Donald Trump making it clear the next Olympics are in the States. Like, well, you know, your passport's going to have to say whether you're a man or a woman, and it's got to actually match your biological sex. End of, nothing to discuss. It is interesting, of course, that there is no ban on, you know, we don't talk about it in terms of headlines. There's a ban on trans women supposedly playing in the men's game. So trans men playing in the men's game. What a surprise, because women don't go and play in the men's game. Like, why not? Because there's a clear biological physical difference. And again, we know this goes all the way down, trickles all the way down to school sports, to, you know, to weekend leagues, where young women, young girls are absolutely terrified of playing against boys. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, they're higher testosterone levels. Girls are getting, and women are getting hurt, physically hurt in these matches.
Yes, it wasn't just about equality, it was about safety as well. And I think what the worst thing that I think of is that how little people who were trying to say these things at a local level about a sports club were just ignored or accused of being transphobic. You know, this Supreme Court judgment, you know, I know it was a narrowly focused, is still just such a huge, it kind of takes a big weight off so many people's shoulders. I really genuinely think so.
Well, we're going to be talking later in the show, though, just about how many organisations, bodies, public services and others are just fighting against this and basically saying we won't obey the law. And I would say to them, good luck to that. But every single person who makes that decision should face the sack and the costs of the legal costs when they lose those legal battles, which they will.
Well, Julia, I always like to bring in a bit of Northern Ireland. The Justice Minister, who's a woman, Naomi Long, in Belfast yesterday, said still that she had no objection, basically, to men going into women's prison, men who considered themselves to be women, to be housed in women's prison. So, you know, we've really got to hone down on some of these details and get the guidance that is actually making, particularly executives and assemblies, you know, not to comply with the Supreme Court ruling. Is outrageous.
It really is quite extraordinary, isn't it? And these are the people who criticise, you know, people sort of who've criticised other judgments by the Supreme Court. But certainly when I've criticised decisions, I never said that I wouldn't obey the law. I mean, that's the big difference.
Well,
you can disagree with the judgment, but it doesn't matter whether you agree or you disagree. The judgment is a judgment. It's the Supreme Court of the land. End of.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, I didn't agree with them over the protocol, as you know, their judgment, but we have to comply with it. And of course, you know, ultimately governments can decide. But I don't think Sir Keir Starmer will be coming forward to try and move something in Parliament, even though a lot of his Labour MPs would like to.
You mentioned the Belfast link there. Can we also talk about counter-terrorism police in Britain? They are going to investigate online videos showing the Northern Irish rap trio Kneecap calling for the death of British MPs, actually saying, kill your MP, also shouting, up Hamas, up Hezbollah. They said the only good Tory is a dead Tory, kill your local MP. Now, I mean, this is all on video. People saying allegedly, it's all on video. The question would be whether or not that is a crime or not. Counter-terrorism police actually investigating, given that we have had two MPs murdered, Tory and Labour, in the last 10 years, given, you know, a very small group of people and a huge death rate there, and people casually saying, kill your MP. What do you make of this? Should there be charges brought?
Well, I'm all in favour of free speech, but free speech has to have a line, and where you're actually provoking violence, which is what that was. I mean, there is no context that I can see where you can possibly say kill your local MP that can justify it. And you know, they have got away with an awful lot of these things that people haven't noticed for some time. And of course, when they brought in the Hamas and the Hezbollah, that actually got the national news. But it really is something that needs to be stopped. And they love the publicity. That's the sad thing, you know. But I think once the concerts start being cancelled, and there's already been a few cancelled, they'll realise that you can't get on with that. And of course, there were 4 members of Parliament before, just over 10 years ago, who were murdered.
Very good point. Yes, very good point.
They weren't mentioned because they were done as a sort of Irish thing, you know. And it's
political assassination.
So I'm pleased that this is going to go ahead, hopefully, and they'll investigate. And if they can press charges.
Yeah, I'd like charges to be brought against those trans activists holding up banners and placards calling for women's rights campaigners.
I thought that was shocking.
I don't know. These people are literally pictured online. The idea that the police can't identify these people and bring charges. You're holding up that placard. It's visible to all. It's on camera. It's on video.
No, it's
bang to rights.
It's some things the police will act on and some things they won't. And of course, we saw that awful case of that poor woman who made a dreadful, dreadful, awful tweet and has gone to prison and is still in prison.
31 months,
Just wrong. Yeah. But anyway, we're getting there. The Supreme Court judgment means we're moving slightly backwards on some of this nonsense and getting back to a bit of common sense.
I hope so, but I have to say I don't think the people who are pushing this.
Agree.
I don't think they'll ever see sense. But there we are. Always so good to talk to you, Baroness Kate Hoey, independent peer and former Labour MP. Just coming back in on the kneecap issue. Philip Ingram still with me in the studio, and you mentioned the fact that this band have chosen to name themselves after a horrific, basically a punishment crime, which is routine in Northern Ireland, torture. I mean, people talk, give them a kneecapping, people joke about it, but this is absolutely horrific crime. But it is interesting. I mean, Graham, we talk a lot on the show because it's real about two-tier policing. But this is the issue: the fact that there has to be a massive outcry for some of these things to get investigated. Whereas people who are saying something different on the right, I think, if it was something about reality, if it was something about Muslims, if it was something about gay people or trans people, I think they would be questioned by the police very, very, very quickly.
Well, we have two-tier policing when it comes to the application of the Terrorism Act in the United Kingdom. Kneecap at all of the concerts for the last few years have been shouting "Ooh ah up the Ra," which is a call for the support for the IRA, which is another proscribed organisation. But it's Northern Irish band supporting Irish terrorists. Irish terrorism doesn't
They're freedom fighters, aren't they?
Well, I'm sorry. It contravenes the Terrorism Act.
I don't want people cancelled. I don't believe in people being cancelled. I think people should not be allowed to be basically inciting violence. That is a crime. You're not allowed to incite crimes. But I don't want people cancelled. I don't want their band cancelled. They can carry on. Just stop inciting violence.
Yes, but when you see them posing for their latest album in front of a mural on the wall, and that mural is a police service of Northern Ireland Land Rover on fire, with people throwing petrol bombs at it.
These are not nice people.
And that is seen as acceptable. It's not. And these individuals were born, two of them were born after the Good Friday Agreement. One of them was 7 years old. The Good Friday Agreement was signed. They hadn't seen the troubles beforehand. It's just by what they've been briefed.
The interesting thing when they say, kill your MP, I mean, genuinely, again, not allegedly, they said it. Is actually, it was MPs, it was politicians that actually brought about peace so that they could live in relative peace. It's not perfect, but it's better than it was. Philip Ingram, thank you for that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to be taking a quick break. We're going to be talking to Jake Wallace-Simons about a director of a Muslim association, the Muslim Association of Britain, who was called October the 7th a lie. That's up next. This is Talk.
there's a vociferous section of other communities that think the IOPC isn't anti-police. They think actually they're pro-police, and that's why they never prosecute anyone, successfully prosecute anyone.
Yes.
So the IOPC are desperate to convince certain communities, and you know, Chris Cabba would be part of it, one of the communities I'm talking about, and go, look, you know, we've got to establish that, you know, we're on their side and we're going to take this to the nth degree.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk to our next guest now, Jake Wallace-Simons. He's the author of Israelophobia, the newest version of the oldest hatred, and what to do about it. He's also a columnist now at The Telegraph. Very good morning to you, Jake.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. I have to say, I mean, these stories just keep on coming, but yet another prominent figure in sort of a leading Muslim organisation in this country apparently having issues with the truth. The Muslim Association of Britain has always denied being an extremist organisation. However, one of its most senior directors, who was formerly a president of this organisation, Anas al-Tikriti, has described the massacre on October the 7th in Israel in 2023 as, in his words, a lie, and he's even called the taking of hostages, in his words, a very important part of any act of resistance. What do you make of these comments?
I think the first thing to say is that he's hardly alone in that view amongst the British Muslim community. A study last year established that 3 out of 4 British Muslims do not believe that Hamas carried out massacre and rape on October the 7th. 46% supported or had some sympathy for Hamas, which coincidentally was the same number who thought that Jews had too much power in politics. So this is a problem with radicalization in the British Muslim community. Yeah. And Islamist organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a worldwide, basically jihadi organization, which has been kicked out of many Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Egypt, and now Jordan, has set up base in Britain and across the West. It's not banned here.
Yes.
And it's influencing the way that people, British Muslims, think and what they're allowed to say. It intimidates them. It influences them in all sorts of different ways. But as soon as the government tries to accuse it of extremism, it denies all charges and says, no, we're just ordinary Brits who are concerned about Gaza. We're not extremists.
It's all about Palestinian children always, isn't it?
Exactly.
But you mentioned that survey that showed, I think it was a Henry Jackson Society survey, was it not? That 3/4 of British Muslims don't believe that the 7th of October massacre actually happened. It wasn't a massacre, I mean, despite all the evidence. But actually, there's a pretty large percentage, nothing close to 3/4, of non-Muslim Brits who also believe that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's this weird phenomenon of an alliance between the Islamists and the left, and unfortunately, the left happens to control many of the levers of our media, and indeed have made have a strong representation in politics. And so the effect of that is that Islamist propaganda is supported and magnified by the left, whether it's through the media or international organisations such as the UN or wherever, and in politics, to create this misapprehension that Israel is conducting some genocide in Gaza and that Israel is to blame for all this, even though Israel is simply responding to defend its citizens against the outrageous, appalling atrocities of October the 7th.
But even, you know, the leftist news organisations in Britain, you know, the BBC and Channel 4, even they don't pretend to think that the Israeli massacre, you know, the massacre by Hamas in Israel on October the 7th didn't happen. But again, what's extraordinary that anybody, Muslim or otherwise, in Britain or not, should question that when most of the evidence for that massacre on October the 7th comes from footage filmed on the body cams of the Hamas terrorists themselves, gleefully put online, proudly put online, of their horrific crimes.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas might be a bunch of morally degenerate and backward savages, but they are very sophisticated when it comes to manipulating the West and our sympathies and public opinion. And the fact that they've managed to be so proud of those atrocities, to the extent they filmed them, bragged about them, put them online, and then a year or two later have managed to engineer, with the help of the Western press, a situation where people don't believe what they saw, with their own eyes is really testament to their success in their propaganda efforts. Thankfully, they haven't got as much prowess when it comes to war fighting. They're losing, but certainly they seem to have won over a lot of Western public in the propaganda war.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, and certainly in Britain and America, it's absolutely extraordinary. I'm amazed by it. I mean, again, I think one can have many different opinions on the situation in the Middle East and on Israel. That's fine. Those are all completely legitimate. But the number of people who have an opinion based on absolute abject nonsense and simply no facts at all, I find quite terrifying. Absolutely, actually. Yeah. But in terms of what do we do about the fact that this guy, he was president of the Muslim Association of Britain, he's still a director. The Muslim Association of Britain has distanced themselves from Mr. Al-Tikriti's comments, saying he does not speak for or represent the views of the MAB. We've got the Muslim Council of Britain as well. I mean, the government no longer has anything to do with them, although they used to be supposedly the representatives of the Muslim population in this country. By the way, always self-appointed men, not aware of any elections that everyone takes part in. I mean, I don't have an atheist representation group. There's no atheist association of Britain that represents me. I don't know when did those elections take place. But what do we do about people who hold those views? He's entitled to be as wrong as he wants about anything, but what do we do about it?
Well, I think it's very clear. I mean, the reason why this has come to prominence at the moment is because the Muslim Association of Britain has been accused of being part of the Muslim Brotherhood, a front organisation for the Muslim Brotherhood. It's been accused of that many times. In fact, it was set up by Mohammed Sawalha, who was a former Hamas commander, so its origin story isn't great. But look, it's been accused of being part of the Muslim Brotherhood by Michael Gove under parliamentary privilege last year and by others, and it's denying it. But I think what we need to do is to ban the Muslim Brotherhood. It's an Islamist network working in Britain to radicalise our Muslim population, turn them against the West and try to impose Sharia law by increments over generations. Yeah. If we ban that, as it has been banned in Saudi Arabia, in the Emirates, in Egypt, in Jordan and in Austria, and of course in Bahrain, if we took that step, then suddenly the police will have enforcement powers to work out, are you actually a member of the Muslim Brotherhood? And if so, get out.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It is absolutely fascinating, though, how so many people on the left sort of feel very uncomfortable about this. I mean, it's actually when in many Arab Muslim countries they have no time for any of this. What did you make of NECAP? This is the Belfast-based rap trio. No, I'd never heard of them before they hit the news. Of course, I hadn't. But not only just saying kill your MP, but also up Hezbollah, up Hamas, supporting two blatantly, openly prescribed terrorist organisations. The police only now saying that they look at investigating them.
Well, this is exactly the point where hard left decolonisation ideology meets Islamist jihadi violence. And you find people who think of themselves as being enlightened revolutionaries looking for a utopian world and find themselves getting into bed with Islamists who are willing to use suicide bombing, rape, mutilation and massacre in the service of their own utopian ideology to create a Sharia world. And so there's this weird sort of horseshoe of politics comes together with these two ideologies finding common cause.
And throwing in trans rights as well. Trans rights and Palestinian rights somehow intertwined, God knows how.
I mean, when I see people with posters saying trans rights for Palestine or trans people for Palestine, you've just got to think, laugh or cry, because it's just so deluded. Any trans person going to Gaza would immediately be thrown off a roof, regardless of their support for the Palestinian cause and for Hamas. And so, look, the whole thing is moral confusion on a grand scale in the West. But we've got to get tough. We've got to ban Islamist organisations that are working to undermine our way of life and their support.
Tolerance for intolerance it breeds a very, very, very dangerous society for the rest of us. Always good to talk to you, Jake Wallace-Simons. Thank you very much. Quick word from Philip Ingram.
Jake's 100% right. We do need to get tough with all of this and stop giving in. And the Muslim Brotherhood are an evil, evil organisation.
And again, a lot of people talk about like Tommy Robinson-style conspiracies about what these extremist Islamic group want to do. No, they say what they want to do, like Hamas, like Hezbollah.
And they do it.
They're very open about it. You don't have to make it up. They tell us what they want to do. So much more to talk about. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. Stay tuned.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Good morning on this beautiful, I would say even swelteringly hot day here in Britain. I hope you're having a nice day and enjoying a little bit of the sunshine, even if you're with you working from home, wink, wink, whether you are able to get out at lunchtime or not. But it's great to have your company, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it's great to have your company. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about Labour's biggest union backer. That's the Unite Union, attacking the net zero policy, warning as set to become a political millstone around the party's neck. This is amid growing unrest over the Green agenda, and Keir Starmer failing yesterday to guarantee net zero Secretary Ed Miliband's job. Plus, the US and Ukraine haven't signed a minerals deal after weeks of negotiation. More on that. And also fears of a US recession as Donald Trump's trade tariff war, so official figures seeing the economy shrinking during the first 3 months of the year. We've also had breaking news in the last hour from the Football Association of England. They are going to be banning trans-identified men, what they laughingly call trans women, from women's football from next season. Quite right too. All that coming up, plenty more besides. And joining me for all the chat today, Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. I love that you take your glasses off when I introduce you on the camera. I have to put mine on to read virtually anything.
Well, they shine in the lights. That's right.
Oh, that's
yeah,
what it is. We want to be able to see those sparkling eyes.
Yeah, and I've memorised everything, and therefore don't need to read it.
Well, you're a military intelligence officer, so I'm guessing you can just look at everything and go, yeah, it's all in. I've got it all.
Upside down. Reading upside down on a desk.
Can you do that?
I used to be able to do that, yes.
Quite
a good trick.
Philip Ingram is a... No, what did you read?
Oh, no, I can't put that out in there.
Lots to talk about. Let's start with our breaking news the last hour, though. The Football Association of England, got to put the glasses back on again. It follows a similar move by the Scottish FA this week after that UK Supreme Court ruling just a couple of weeks ago that women are defined by biological sex. Like we all knew, but they're going to be banning male players who claim to be women. Now, if we use the correct terminology, it's easier to understand. Why are you banning women from playing women's football? No, we're not. We're banning men who claim that they are women or think that they are women from women's football. That's from next season. In Scotland, only players who were female at birth, always female, will be allowed to play in women's football over the age of 13. The crucial thing is, if you've gone through male puberty, you've got the testosterone, at the end of the matter, you have a male advantage. I don't think it needs to be any complicated. You're either male or female, and you play in the correct sex category. But a statement from the English FA said, as the governing body of the national sport, our role is to make football accessible to as many people as possible, operating within the law and international football policy defined by UEFA and FIFA. Our current policy, which allows transgender women to participate in the women's game, was based on this principle and supported by expert legal advice. It wasn't ever expert. This is a complex subject. No, it's not. And our position has always been that if there was a material change in law, science, or the operation of the policy in grassroots football, then we would review it and change it if necessary. No change in the science, certainly. There's actually been no change to the law. They just weren't applying the law. Supreme Court ruling means that we will be changing our policy. Transgender women will no longer be able to play in women's football in England as of 1st of June 2025. I love they say, we understand this will be difficult for people who simply want to play the game they love in the gender by which they identify. Well, tough.
No, tough.
I mean, well, tough.
Exactly.
What about all the women and girls who really want to play the game of football but can't play it because they're so fearful of being tackled by a man who's 6 foot tall and has the body mice? I mean, sorry. The people who are claiming that men can become women and women become men, well, they're just mad and liars, or both. I know there are people who genuinely believe that they are born in the wrong body, and I have every empathy and respect for you, but you aren't. We're happy to give you respect and kindness. I don't want people to discriminate against you, be prejudiced against you, but you don't get to acquire the rights of the body that you think you have, that you're the brain that you think you have.
Simple chromosome test.
Simple chromosome test. But we don't even need a chromosome test. I can look at you and you can look at me. We know what we are. But when you look at some of these players who've gone into not just football, but into many other sports where it is men competing in women's sports, it is blatantly obvious by the fact that, hey, they're on the podium winning, and and they're winning a race by 10 meters or by 5 seconds or something, when normally it's like by 0.002 of a second, or when they are clearly head and shoulders above. And we are seeing women. There have been women football players who have been seriously injured because they're being tackled by someone who is twice their weight, their size, their physical strength. The physical differences between men and women are so blatantly obvious. It's embarrassing that anyone claimed they weren't there. And a bit of taking a bit of testosterone or not taking a bit of testosterone or whatever, or a puberty blocker, doesn't make a difference to that. Yeah, well, these experts, expert, X, something historical you usually want to forget, spurt, a drip under pressure. So they've been relying on drips under pressure, historical drips under pressure to give them the advice. But I hope what we're seeing from the Football Association is the start of a new pandemic. And it's a pandemic of common sense. I mean, you hope so, but they've only been forced into it by the Supreme Court. Well, exactly. And of course, that always amazes me is, as we said, Keir Starmer changed his view on trans women or not women based on the Supreme Court. But I mean, the Supreme Court ruling simply clarified the law. It didn't change any of the science or the reality. That I would agree or disagree with the Supreme Court ruling. It wouldn't change my view. If the Supreme Court said, no, being a woman is not based on biology, and they'd gone against my view and the view of the women from For Women Scotland and Sex Matters and others, I wouldn't have gone, oh, well, fair enough. The judges have said that. I mean, I don't know how you can have an honest view and it changes because of the courts. I think it's absolutely absurd. But the law is clarified. End of. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text on 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV as well. Also love to hear your thoughts on Labour's biggest union backers, Unite, now backing GMB as well, union, basically over the government's net zero energy policies, basically saying, look, this is about job losses. This is a millstone around the neck of politicians. Those 500,000 green jobs that we've heard so much about, lol, never going to happen. I'm sure there will be a green revolution at some point. If there is a green revolution, it's happening in China, where they're using coal-fired power stations to actually make big factories work, where they are producing all of those wind turbines and solar panels, which they're shipping over here on diesel-powered tankers for us to put up here. I mean, there aren't any jobs in it for us. We're losing jobs as a result of this policy. It's a good thing the unions are speaking out, isn't it? Well, it's a fantastic thing the unions are speaking out, and I'm surprised, and I think this is an indication of we're probably going to get into a summer or autumn of discontent, because we're starting to see more and more unions moving away from government policies that are coming out. So and they're also unhappy about the pay deals, because and the NHS pay deals and other things. So there's a lot brewing in the background, and it doesn't bode well for. But do you think that the Labour perhaps thought, well, when we're in, of course, the civil service will be on our side. They've been on our side for years. They're going to carry on working, for us. All these unions, we're going to give the various paymasters, big deals, train drivers, doctors' unions and others, and people. And again, and some of the pay deals are offered. They were right. Some of the pay demands and some of the independent pay review body solutions, around the 3-4% mark, they're above inflation. But we're still going to be talking about public sector workers, teachers, nurses, and others who are still going to be earning less now in real terms than they did 10, 20 years ago. I don't have a problem with them getting those sort of pay rises. The trouble is, how do you pay for it, other than raising taxes for everyone else or cutting vital services that people desperately need? Well, exactly, and this is where there needs to be, the government's come up with a plan for growth, but again, a lot of the policies that they're coming out with are anti-growth in everything that they do. So there's a complete lack of coherence across the board, and I think the coherence is going to be forced on the government, and if it's going to be forced on the government by the unions doing a reset, yes, it is reality, but union-derived reality tends not to bode well for the stability of the country. What do you make of the failure of Number 10 yesterday in Keir Starmer to basically guarantee Ed Miliband's job as Energy Secretary and Net Zero Secretary? Milliwatt's about to be turned off. You think so? Does that solve anything, though? As I keep pointing out, he didn't come up with the policy. Keir Starmer's backed it. It was in the manifesto that his people wrote. He appointed him. Yeah, we're about due a government reshuffle anyway. It's weird, this idea in this country that we should reshuffle people all the time and have different people in the job. Just when they get to grips with how to work their the civil service blob, they get moved on. That's why we've never had any bloody decent decisions on housing or anything. There was a point, I think, under the Tories where we'd had about 15 housing ministers.
Or they don't get to grips with the department. That's part of the trouble. And this is where you have to recognise that you can invest as much time as you want in trying to get someone to run their department.
Some people can't do it.
But then you have to realise that they may be the nicest person, they may be your best mate, you've rewarded them into that job, but they can't do it, and you have to move them on. And we haven't had that reset yet from Keir Starmer.
Well, also there's an element, isn't there? Yes, you've made promises.
Yes.
I mean, the only person who got put out, I think, last time I was Emily Thornberry.
Yeah.
That was at least one good decision. But I'm not sure David Lammy was the right decision on that front, but there we are. There are quite a lot. I mean, again, in terms of shadow opposition spokespeople, Kemi Badenoch's got rather few MPs to choose from. Everyone's having to kind of do two jobs, aren't they? Well, look, I'd love to hear your reaction to that on the net zero policies, and indeed on the union stepping up, Ed Miliband's job, and indeed also Norway, senior Norwegian ministers saying to Britain, don't give up on oil. We'll never turn our back on North Sea oil like you have. And again, the madness of us being told, we're at the mercy of international energy prices and gas prices, and that's why we got so hard hit by the Ukraine war and things. But other countries also at the mercy of international energy prices weren't as hard hit as us. Why not?
Yeah, well, and with Norway, they want us not to take North Sea oil and gas because they're drilling into the same oil fields and gas fields.
Are they not separate? Do we not have a delineation?
Well, there is a delineation, but you don't know what's really happening under the ground, and they're all linked. And the delineation line is a line down the North Sea saying that's Norwegian territory, that's UK territory, and some of the oil fields are underneath.
And when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, we need to get our energy from somewhere. A lot of the time we get it from Norway.
Yes.
I mean, we could be getting it ourselves.
Exactly.
Oh no, but we'd be at the mercy of international gas prices. Well, then how come America hasn't been when they've been
change
fracking?
Policy, and how come our energy prices are greater than anywhere else in Europe?
Yeah, I mean by 50%, and for industrial energy prices 4 times that of America.
We pay more than the Russians who are under sanctions for energy.
Yeah, very, very fair point. I mean, they just run on vodka, don't they?
Yeah.
Literally the entire country is run on vodka.
Scotland runs on whiskey.
I have never ever got over being in Sharm el-Sheikh airport. This was a couple of weeks before the bomb that meant you couldn't go to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt anymore. But we used to go there, years and years, cheap and cheerful holidays. Costa del Sol in Egypt. No guaranteed, no rain. I'm sitting in the airport, and virtually everyone else in the airport from our one flight were Russian, and people were literally, I mean, they were having to restock the vodka shelves. I mean, roughly every 5 minutes, people were literally going in, buying a bottle of vodka. They were having pint glasses and they were pouring pints of vodka. This is the women, by the way, not just the men, and drinking. They've got kids with them.
Those little baseball caps with the cups and the straws that go down. Full of vodka.
I mean, I'm talking genuinely. We actually, with our kid, we went and hid in a corner because we were so scared of the feeling of aggro in the airport, the fact that everyone in that airport was about a pint of vodka in. It was a very bad atmosphere. And when that horrific bomb attack on the Russians happened, someone pointed out to me, no one would have felt a thing. Yeah. Because but genuinely, that whole country is running off. I know it's the only country. It's the only country where the mortality rates. Well, they're going. The mortality rate's going up, but also their longevity is going down because of cirrhosis of the liver.
Exactly. Well, I
don't know why we got onto this.
I've worked with the Russians before and seen what their drinking habits are, and deliberately avoided going off for things.
You think we're bad? Think we're bad in Britain? The Spanish think we're bad.
So the impact it had on some of my colleagues, but those are stories not for on air.
Indeed. Anyway, I'm sure there'll be a few vodkas taken tonight with this beautiful weather in Britain. But anyway, get back in touch. I want to hear from you. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1. Standard network rate message. Let's also talk about this trade deal, the Donald Trump UK trade deal, apparently on the back burner. However, a mineral deal with Ukraine signed and sealed. How significant is that?
I think it's very significant, and the mineral deal is nothing like had been talked about beforehand. It's actually an investment fund to rebuild Ukraine, is how it's been put out.
Why has it changed so much from what it was previously?
Well, I think this
was basically you owe us everything.
Yeah, I think this is down to a lot of hard work from President Zelensky in the background, but I'll put in there probably from Francois Macron and Keir Starmer as well, trying to help influence.
I think they've done a really good job. I will always give credit where it's due.
I think they are doing a good job in trying to bring the United States into the planet Earth when it comes to
but
reality.
Don't you think that Vladimir Putin kind of, cut off his nose to spite his face? We're talking about, let's have he's talking about this, a temporary peace, truce over this coming weekend, but also, a few days over Easter, or like 24 hours virtually, clearly broken, but also the bombing of civilian targets in Kyiv. By the way, no one's talking about genocide about that, are they? It's only apparently when the Israelis do it. It's an issue for people. Don't care about Ukrainian children dying at all. But I thought that rather undermined Putin's case that, I'm looking for peace.
Oh, completely undermined. Putin does want peace. I don't think Putin can afford peace. And he's missed so many opportunities where...
What do you mean he can't afford peace?
Well, I think he's got to a position now where he's got so much invested in the conflict. If the conflict ends and he starts to have to disband his military, he's going to have tens of thousands of injured men coming back, but tens of thousands of men that are going to be suddenly unemployed, but they're trained killers.
And it's a wartime economy.
And
all the violent offenders in prisons have been let out.
Yeah, and therefore I think he's getting to that point where it's going to be very difficult for him to extract himself from it, and the personal risk to him then is going to go through the roof. So he doesn't want this to finish.
Exactly. I mean, he's quite happy with that meat grinder as long as he's not in it. Can I also ask you about the latest... I mean, I cannot believe these cases still keep coming, but they do. They are virtually every day. This is the latest case of an asylum seeker who's won the right under human rights claims. Again, total misinterpretation. It's not an interpretation, misinterpretation of human rights laws and rights here in this country. He's won the right to remain in the country. He's a Ghanaian asylum seeker. I don't know why you need to have asylum from Ghana. He's argued that he's too traumatised by getting COVID to return to his home country. Winfred Kwabla Dogbe was diagnosed with PTSD after he was hospitalised with the virus back in 2020. He did have severe COVID illness. He had multiple organ failure. The 52-year-old told a tribunal he'd been experiencing post-COVID-19 syndrome, was part of a rehabilitation programme for those impacted. And they heard that this type of treatment in the West African country that he's getting was practically non-existent. Oh no, what a surprise. Psychiatric care insufficient, and therefore he would have a rapid and severe decline in his mental health, so he's won his claim to stay in the UK. Guess where? In the upper tier tribunal. He came here in April 2013 on a visa, claimed asylum 3 years later. When this was refused, has basically carried on making these claims. I mean, he's a wrong-un. He's here illegally. He should have been thrown out the moment his visa expired, let alone when he made a dubious claim 3 years later. And we've heard more about this from Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, recently, that this is now a common thing. People arrive here legally, and then as soon as their tourist visa, work visa, student visa or whatever runs out, it turns out I need asylum, I can't go back. But I mean, I'm really sorry that the health care and the psychiatric care in your country isn't as good or as mediocre as it is in this country.
But tough.
Not my problem, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't you work and campaign in your home country to improve the lot of people in your country? Are we now just going to take in every single person from a country which doesn't have a decent healthcare system? Because that's a couple of billion people.
Well, this is one side of the judiciary that has not had the common sense pills yet. We keep seeing the different cases. But
be ousted.
One of the things I read about yesterday, and it's not related to this case, but there was a judge in one of the asylum-seeking decision-making tribunals who was a part-time judge, but the rest of the time worked for a charity helping asylum seekers go through the asylum process.
But he's completely neutral.
Completely neutral. It was a she. Was completely neutral and would not let one impact the other. Well, I'm sorry, that in professional terms is a conflict of interest and should not be allowed.
One of the things we're always told, though, we need more judges from diverse backgrounds, sort of things like that. But they don't. In no way do judges bring in their personal views or personal experiences in their tribunal or court rulings. Well, which is it? Because if judges don't bring that in, then
you don't need
then we can just have old white men making all the decisions, can't we? Or are you saying that women have different decisions, or people of different ethnic groups or religious groups or different classes bring different things to those judgments? So I mean, it's one or the other. It can't be both. As always with these things. It's just a basic... The lack of logic in these thinking is extraordinary.
Common sense pills to be delivered to the upper tribunal judges,
for the love of God.
Quickly.
11:21 is time. Love to hear from you on all these stories. 0344 499 1000. We'll take some of your calls up next. This is Talk.
unpick everything of what you've said, please?
Yep.
Okay, because first and foremost, I think you were very generous in your description of Chris Cabba. He was a worthless piece of garbage who beat up his pregnant girlfriend, who the night before he was killed was discharging a firearm in a nightclub and then ran outside and then attempted to shoot and finish off, basically, the target. He would have been a murderous so-and-so had he not been thwarted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:25 is the time. Philip Ingram is still with me as well. Lots of your messages coming in about Labour's biggest union backers. It's Unite now, going along with GMB as well. Attacking the government's net zero energy policies over job loss. It's all about the jobs. It's amazing. Unions actually caring about jobs, and nobody seem to care about pretty much everything else but the jobs. But your reaction to that? Jacob says, when a cartoon character is in charge, you get Mickey Mouse politics. But again, it's not Ed Miliband in charge of net zero policies. Belinda says energy prices are going through the roof. Thanks, net zero. Apparently it's all down to the international market. Apparently that's what we're told. Just doesn't seem to be happening to other countries. Weird though, hey? Brenda says, can we please just sack Red Ed? No need for a net zero secretary. Let's drill, baby, drill. And Sean says the Labour government probably don't care about uniting with Unite. It's called biting the hand that feeds them. Let's go to Neil, who's on the line in Buckinghamshire, to get his thoughts on this. Good morning to you, Neil.
Morning.
Good morning. What do you want to say?
Ed Miliband is safe while Starmer's in charge, like all his front bench, because he won't sack any of them for the simple reason it takes the spotlight off his failings.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about Miliband. No one is talking about Starmer, what he said in PMQs yesterday. Did he answer Kemi Badenoch about the grooming gangs? No. Again, the Speaker lets him get away with not answering questions, takes the spotlight off. Miliband's there. All the rest, Rachel Thieves, they're all doing what they want to do. Starmer's got his hand.
And you're right. Everyone talks about the Chancellor making these terrible decisions. The First Lord of the Treasury is the Prime Minister. They're ultimately responsible for every government policy. So basically all the grief over tax goes on Rachel Reeves, all the grief over net zero goes on Ed Miliband, and when he's had enough and the heat's got too much in the kitchen, he can oust them both, and then he goes, nothing to do with me, Gaff.
But the thing is, Liz Truss apparently crashed the economy. She wasn't the Chancellor.
No.
So why does Liz Truss get blamed for it when it's not Starmer?
Yeah.
You see, it's all the same.
Very good
he
point.
will not sack any of his front bench with a reshuffle because they're doing him a favour.
But how long is he going to keep them both, though?
Well, as long as he's in charge. He won't get rid of them two.
Really? I don't think
in his cabinet.
I don't think they. I mean, I don't think Rachel Reeves is the chance for the next election. That's for sure. I don't think Ed Miliband lasts more than a year.
By that time, the country's knackered. Isn't it? You know, and Starmer don't care. He'll be off some lawyer in somewhere for health. You know, with everything.
He'll be living in Mauritius.
Probably. He better not be, because that's where I go on holiday. Get
you. Apart my honeymoon in Mauritius, very, very nice. Neil, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to the phone lines again. John is in Merseyside. And John, you wanted to respond to that announcement from the English Football Association that trans-identified men are no longer, funnily enough, because they're men, going to be playing in the women's game.
Good morning, Julia. Yeah, I just, with this coming out today, and maybe assist, but the FA and also the BBC were hand in hand together with you, Mr. Lineker and all that, but I'd like to see this go right the way through.
Go right the way through what? What do you mean?
Well, ladies rugby.
Yep.
And obviously the old days when they all used to jump in the hot tub and all that, obviously that doesn't happen anymore. So you wouldn't know. But no. So I hope with the FA doing this,
Well, you would know. Can I say this is the point? This laughable idea that people don't know when someone is trans and claiming to be a different. You really do. It's really very obvious the vast majority of the time. But you're saying this should be across the board in all sport because they're all different sports bodies. But I think that is going to change simply because the law is very clear. If it's a single sex, if it's a women only event or resource or place, then it has to be only for women, and that doesn't include men who think they're women.
Well, the thing is, I mean, we have Paralympics, don't we, for our good service people. And they have their own things. So, if you want to be a trans, you can have your own football league. You can have your own.
Or you can simply
play. You can have that.
You can play in the football matches in the league that matches your biological sex. There's nothing. No one's being banned from playing any sport. You just don't get to play in the wrong category.
I mean, I played rugby league up north here. I mean, I was clattered to hell. But when I see some of these lady footballers and rugby players, good God, I'd have been bloody put to me back.
Yeah, the trouble is the men who, and let's call them what they are, the cheats, who go and play in what is for men an easier league. They are stealing away women's places and putting women at risk. John, thank you for your call. Appreciate that. John is in Merseyside. 11:30 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, going to be talking to a former Conservative government minister and a leading light on the net zero and quite a lot of the other sane issues in politics in recent years. Steve Baker. We're also going to talk to a former White House official, Matthew Bryser, about that Ukraine deal between the US and Ukraine, and also what is going on with the US economy. And when America sneezes, does the rest of the world, including Britain, get a cold? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:33 is the time. Look, put the suntan lotion down. You're supposed to be at work. I know it's a warm and lovely, lovely day, but we're in a cold studio. Well, everyone else in a cold office too. Philip Ingram is still with me. Good morning once again to you.
Good morning. Yes, we're not getting the chance to work from home and in the sun and with
get the afternoon.
A nice glass of Pimm's.
Yeah, you're right. You talked a lot about booze since about 10 o'clock this morning. I'm very worried about you.
Well, it's just looking looking out the window and I'm going, oh, he has lovely.
Well, I mean, today, of course, solar panels will be doing a good job. Although, again, in Spain and in Portugal, they were doing a good job on Monday before all went a little bit horribly wrong. But, of course, don't talk about that because, of course, that might be bad for the narrative. Look, let's talk about this and many other topics with my next guest. Steve Baker's former Conservative MP and former Conservative government minister and a leading light on campaigning against some of the main madnesses we've gone through in recent years. A very good morning to you, Steve.
Good morning, Julia. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. Just first of all, I'd get your reaction to trade unions apparently rejecting, apologies, trying not to sneeze at the same time as talking to you, Ed Miliband and Keir Starmer's green policies. The Unite Union, a major backer of the Labour Party, basically saying this is now going to become a political millstone because it's not producing the jobs. GMB Union, another backer, they have also said, look, this is just a joke and it's just not going to deliver the jobs that they want. Nice to know that unions are caring about jobs again for a change instead of another political policy. But do you think this may be, and especially after what happened in Spain and Portugal this week, very likely down to over-reliance on renewable energy, do you think this could be the beginning of the end of net zero policies?
Yes, I think it is the beginning of the end of net zero policy. I think you're absolutely right. And, Tony Blair issued some very sensible statements about it, backed by a report from his own think tank, only to then have a reverse ferret on it. Very strange. But it's a sign that the groupthink is breaking down, and a jolly good thing too. People's energy bills have soared. They've really felt that. And, of course, industry has seen electricity prices soaring, and that's caused immense problems. And so, of course, I'm not surprised that unions at last, with a Labour government in power and a few years ahead of them until the next general election, that they're willing finally to start speaking up. It's in their members' interests that they should do so.
I mean, and that's the thing, because this is about jobs. I mean, certainly the GMB union representing, oil rig workers in Scotland, they started seeing this very, very quickly, and it's very, very interesting to see Norwegian senior minister in the Norway government basically saying we would never turn our back on North Sea oil and gas the way that Britain has done, and the fact that when we don't have enough sunshine, like on a day like today, or enough wind, which is remarkably often, we have to rely on getting energy from elsewhere, including from Norway, who are getting their energy from the resource that we could be using, but are choosing not to. I mean, this is economic suicide, isn't it?
Well, it is crazy, and even if one takes the position of the Committee on Climate Change, we still need gas for a very long time in order to deal with this problem of intermittency. And it's so inconvenient for people that the wind sometimes doesn't blow. And of course, they want to rely on interconnectors, but there'll be times, as people will know, when the whole of Europe lacks wind. And, it really has not been sensible to make ourselves so dependent on intermittent power, and it's a mistake that's going to have to be corrected. Norway is, of course, blessed with hydropower, which, great for them, and in fact Norway has a lot of very, very high power charging stations through the country. I've been an occasional visitor to Norway for many years, but hydropower is a great blessing to them. But they're right, we can't be without oil and gas. We need it to cover intermittency and, of course, for transport for a long time too.
And it is interesting, isn't it, that when we had these blackouts in Spain and Portugal, best part of 24 hours for an awful lot of those countries and the major cities, parts of France as well, the first thought was, was this a cyber attack? And they've said there's no evidence for that. May well be, but no evidence for it so far. And then there was talk about there was some freak weather event. Well, there wasn't a freak weather event. It was 22 and sunny. It was quite normal weather for those countries. But it does seem all the evidence, and again, not from conspiracy theorists or climate deniers in quotes like myself, but simply from people like the people running the electricity grid in Spain, that actually it looks like there was a problem with intermittent surges and the like from solar farms, and that actually the over-reliance and huge reliance they've got on solar power and wind energy in Spain, but in particular, and in Portugal, was the cause. But it's interesting how that has just been quickly skirted over by mainstream media in this country. Move along, nothing to see here. If they thought this was a result of climate change or anything else they could think of, or even a cyber attack, this would still be front page news today, and it isn't.
Well, I'm sure that's right, yes. I mean, it's a real problem that people get immersed in consensus and then can't break out of it. I watched the BBC touch on this issue that potentially renewables were to blame for the shutdown.
Yeah.
But they were very, very wary of going there. But in contrast, if you look at papers from the Global Warming Policy Foundation, of which I was a trustee, years ago they were warning that the energy grid would become unreliable because of renewables. There's this issue called inertia, that if you've got heavy rotating machinery, as you do with turbines, then it's much easier to maintain the 50 hertz frequency of our electricity supply. Now, at risk of getting into too much technical language, the frequency of the supply is really important. If it varies too much from narrow limits, the system has to have safeguards which trip in and shut other systems down.
Yep.
Now, of course, we've got to wait for the full and final report. But again, people have got to be willing to face up to the truth here. There's an awful lot of fact checkers out there, and I wish they, like BBC Verify, I wish they'd start being willing to verify the truth of what is happening, which is that renewables are a threat to grid stability. And we've known that for years.
They don't. I have to say, it's amazing. I remember BBC Verify contacting me about something to do with vaccines or something during lockdown period. And I responded. I gave them a response. But I said, and here's a list of things you could be actually verifying and questioning. It's amazing when there is something that's genuinely worth us knowing. Oh, what is the completely non-partisan, non-political view on this? Nope. Complete silence, absolute, nothing going on there at all. It's quite bizarre. Can I ask you about a couple of other big stories that are in the news? One is the news, the revelation this morning from the Metropolitan Police that counter-terror police are going to investigate online videos showing the Northern Irish rap trio Kneecap calling for the death of British MPs, saying very clearly the only good Tory is a dead Tory, kill your local MP, and also shouting up Hamas, up Hezbollah. Now, the copy I've got says allegedly. There aren't actually charges brought yet, so it's not sub judice. But also, they're on video. I don't think I have to say allegedly. They're on video doing this. Apparently not the only time. Given that, two of your parliamentary colleagues, when you were an MP, were actually murdered in recent years, Joe Cox and David Amess, someone shouting, and encouraging people to kill your local MP, but also people supporting proscribed terrorist organisations responsible for the most disgusting atrocities against our allies. What do you make of that, and should there be prosecution?
Well, yeah, there certainly should be an investigation and prosecutions, in my view. It looks like a clear case of incitement to murder, a clear case of support for proscribed organisation, which is also an offence. And the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, has set that out in a letter to Glastonbury asking them to ban Kneecap. I mean, there is a limit.
Should they be banned? I'm a free speech. You're not allowed to incite violence. You should be criminally prosecuted for that. But why do they have to be banned from Glastonbury? I just want them to not incite violence.
Well, indeed. I mean, that's a good point, but there are limits on speech in this country. I'm a big free speech advocate as well, but I do think it's reasonable that inciting violence is a criminal offence. I do think it's reasonable that we prescribe terrorist organisations and make it an offence to support them. I mean, we've got to remember what actually happens here.
Yeah.
We had a police officer shot, thankfully survived in Northern Ireland while I was a Northern Ireland office minister. The dissident Republicans attacked him at a football match where they knew he wouldn't have his personal protection weapon. And I think in Northern Ireland, it is worth remembering that it's a place unlike the rest of the United Kingdom in some regards. The police officers are armed there. Northern Ireland office ministers and others require close protection in Northern Ireland. This is extremely serious. And of course, the murder of members of Parliament puts this in sharp relief. It's slightly close to my heart, this one, because at the time they were complaining about Conservative members of Parliament taking decisions about Northern Ireland from London. I was, of course, one of those ministers. So, I wonder if these guys take themselves seriously. But one thing I can say for sure is that the law must take seriously what they've said. We don't pass this legislation, just for virtue signalling. If they've incited murder, then they should be prosecuted for it and face the full weight of the law.
Can I also ask you, as a keen Brexiteer and campaigner for Brexit over the years, what do you make of the talk that we've basically got a US-UK trade deal that's sort of ready to be signed, but we're slipping down the list because the US concerns about Keir Starmer trying to take us closer to the EU, going for this dynamic alignment on basically pretty much every rule going when it comes to manufacturing and agriculture and everything, which would mean that we'd have to follow EU rules even when they weren't in our interest, which, by the way, was the whole point of leaving the EU when it came to the rules side of things, and basically saying, well, and many of his ministers saying, look, the EU as a single bloc, as a bloc, is a bigger trading partner than the US is as just one country. Do you think that that could possibly put that US trade deal at risk?
It certainly could risk a US trade deal, and it would be very surprising if the United States chose to surrender its interests in relation to agriculture. Look, let's be really clear. It's very, very plain that what President Trump is doing is trying to use the force of tariffs in order to get trade deals, to get rid of so-called non-tariff barriers. Those non-tariff barriers are regulations. They're exactly the kind of regulations to which Keir Starmer now wishes to align. So I'd be extremely surprised if the US does decide to surrender their agricultural interests as we align to EU law. It's a big mistake. The EU's agricultural regulations are in breach of World Trade Organization rules, as widely recognised. They're anti-scientific. We have obligations under our Pacific Rim trade deal that we joined, the CPTPP. We have obligations to maintain control of our own regulations, so we can't just sign them away to the EU. What will happen if, by some diplomatic sleight of hand, if he's lucky that President Trump is willing to surrender that agricultural interest, if Keir Starmer gets both a US trade deal and alignment to the EU, we will face being sued by American farmers, possibly by Canadian farmers.
Yeah.
That will result in needing to back out of alignment to the European Union. Then there'll be more litigation. Honestly, it would be such a Pyrrhic victory, thoroughly against the UK's interests. We need to get serious, see through the choice we made and be a free trading nation without all these non-tariff barriers to which Keir Starmer appears to be so addicted.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Can I ask you something else? Again, I'm just throwing this at you just because I saw the study and I thought you'd be interested in this. A study led by a Harvard academic surveyed more than 200,000 people across 6 different continents, and out of the 22 countries surveyed, they placed the UK 20th, ahead only of Turkey and Japan, where basically studied how whether our lives are flourishing and whether they are fulfilling. People are asked questions about happiness, physical health, sense of purpose, quality of their relationships, financial stability and others, but basically found that we are near the bottom of the world rankings when it comes to having fulfilling lives. Do you agree?
Well, I'd be very, very surprised. I mean, the Prosperity Institute in the UK produces every year their prosperity index, and we're always quite close to the top. You know, there's a red, amber, green rating for countries across a wide field of measures, and we're heavily up in the green across the broadest range of measures. I don't think we've ever been at the very top. But it's tricky to believe that this is a bad country. I mean, when you look at the countries that are deep down in the red, Pakistan or Sudan, or so on, you know, these are countries that are deeply troubled by a wide range of factors. So I've not seen that research. I'd need to look at it. But look, of course we've got our troubles in this country. Of course we have. But the idea that we're at the bottom of the rankings for fulfilling lives, I find hard to believe.
Don't accept it. I like that. Steve Baker, former Conservative Government Minister, former MP, really appreciate you joining us, covering all that different ground. Thank you very much for that. Peter, can I put that survey to you as well? These Harvard academics, I'm not sure I trust anything out of Harvard anymore. They all seem to be lunatics over there. But they want the sense of purpose, quality of relationships. They think that one of the reasons why people, a couple of the reasons why people may feel that they are not flourishing and having their lives not feeling fulfilled is less belief in God, less religious participation, but also lack of industrial jobs, those disappearing. But I mean, lingering effects of the pandemic, particularly for young people as well. But basically people just not feeling that they are very happy anymore.
Yeah, I think there's potentially more to it. It's the lack of community spirit, the lack of community. You know, we used to have communities built on families and family groups in villages and towns and neighbourhoods and all the rest of it. We've lost that, and a lot of that is because of the way our society is changing with and bringing in all of the woke policies
and the victimhood. If you tell everyone that their lives are terrible, women, your lives are terrible, anyone, ethnic minority, your lives are terrible. I think an awful lot of it is everyone sitting there looking at their phones all the time.
Yeah, but I'm not surprised if someone fills in a survey that they'll say, oh yeah, it's terrible.
I've been phoned up,
but in reality, they're not.
I've had a few some phone calls about how do you rate your life, and those actual government surveys, ONS surveys, and I said yeah, sure, I'll take part, and I'm sort of going no, 9 or 10 out of 10 on that one, and the person not asking the questions thinks I'm just taking the mick, and I'm like, no, I'm really happy. I'm really sorry to disappoint you. Anyway, 11:48 is time. Quick break. We're going to be talking about what is going on in the States. What does that US-Ukraine mineral deal mean? And is the US about to go into recession? This is Talk.
to bow down to dangerous DEI policies. I am concerned, and I will say the vast majority of the people in the Corps and the armed forces, and probably in all sectors of public life in the United Kingdom, are concerned that this political push will lead to underqualified people being pushed into high up positions where they could cause injuries and deaths. And that's what this whole situation is about.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:51 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still here. Get your thoughts and lots more to talk to you about in the next hour as well. But first up, let's welcome Matthew Bryzer back to the show. He's a former White House official, worked in the Obama administration and joins us right now. Good morning to you, Matthew.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Lots to talk about. Let's get straight to it. This Ukraine-US deal, minerals deal, how significant is it, and how particularly significant is it that in that deal it states that they refer to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 and support for Ukraine since then, suggesting that finally someone in the White House recognises that the invasion of Ukraine wasn't Zelensky's fault.
Yeah, exactly. So, who knows if this agreement will ever be fully implemented? Nobody knows what sorts of critical raw materials, what volumes are available, who will invest. But politically, as you're suggesting, this is a big deal. A, because of what you said, the Trump administration is now recognizing Zelensky didn't start the war. But B, what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said after the signing, he said this agreement is part of a U.S. commitment to a peace that maintains a free and sovereign and stable Ukraine. Putin's fundamental goal in invading Ukraine is to destroy Ukraine as a free, prosperous, and stable country. So strategically, it's significant.
And in terms of there is no security guarantee there, and this coalition of the willing in Europe seems to be remarkably unwilling so far to make itself known. But is there a view that this is a precursor to some sort of security guarantee?
I don't think so. I mean, of course, Zelensky would love that. And I think one of the things that he fell out over with Trump and J.D. Vance, the vice president, back in their tumultuous meeting in February was that Zelensky is saying, I can't agree to a peace if there's not a physical U.S. security guarantee. The Trump administration's philosophy is that tying the two countries together on these sorts of investments is sufficient as a U.S. security guarantee, and now it's up to the Europeans to step up and provide those military security guarantees.
And do you think that will be taken by Vladimir Putin as a sign that actually the US is moving closer to the European position on Ukraine and further away from Vladimir Putin, and that Putin may have overplayed his hand?
I think Putin probably is worried about that today, but who knows what President Trump is going to say tomorrow, right? I mean, I know that friends who worked on previous aid to Ukraine in the last Trump administration who said after that the agreement was reached, Trump forgot that he ever reached that agreement. So we'll see.
Interesting. Now, it's interesting also that Donald Trump has dropped his demand for Zelensky to hold elections. Yeah. His view was that this idea that he was a military dictator, whereas it is completely the norm. Churchill was a military dictator on that basis, that during wartime you don't hold democratic elections. They get the argument that, America held elections during they've not actually been invaded. That's not the same thing. But this demand has been sort of quietly dropped from the latest set of American proposals for a ceasefire. How significant is that? Is that suggest that there has been a proper rapprochement between the two men?
Yeah, thanks to your producer, by the way, I learned of that really important fact. Yeah,
he knows his stuff.
He really does. Yeah, so it was it's a momentary big shift. Again, how enduring will it be? But you're right. I mean, in the past, President Trump was sort of drunken with the talking points of Vladimir Putin, whom he thinks he has a special relationship with. I think that knee-to-knee discussion that Zelensky and Trump had in St. Peter's Basilica during the Peep's funeral, which was just an astounding picture, had a big impact on him. And I think President Trump listened this time to Zelensky and took Zelensky at his word. And as you and I and everybody who follows this stuff knows, Zelensky's speaking the truth. He's not a dictator. Yeah. He's democratically elected. How could he be a Nazi? So I think Trump absorbed that messaging.
Yeah, well, we hope, as you say, though, until tomorrow, we don't know what happens there. Let's talk about the latest statistics for the United States, though, because the US apparently risks being thrown into recession as the tariff trade war continues. Official figures showing that the economy shrank during the first 3 months of the year. Now, of course, bearing in mind, Donald Trump didn't take office till the 20th of January. He's blamed the Biden administration for that. We know there's always a lag on economic figures, but we also know there are some serious issues coming up ahead as an awful lot of the container ships that used to carry goods from China to America are no longer doing that. We've had a big change in the rules in terms of the price level at which tariffs come on from basically, I think it's about $800 down to zero. Everything is going to be facing those 145% tariffs now. That is going to have an impact on the US economy. How damaging is that going to be for Trump? Bearing in mind, of course, he is at the lowest point of a president in his polls at 100 days of any president, I think, in modern day history.
Yeah, so the question is how much of this 0.3% slowdown in the U.S. economy compared with, I think it was growing at 2.6% at the end of the Biden administration, the last quarter, before Trump took office. How much of that is statistical and how much of that is a real slowdown in growth? What do I mean? There was a huge surge, a 40% surge in imports into the United States between Trump's inauguration and so-called Liberation Day when he imposed those tariffs on April 2nd. People were stocking up. Companies were stocking up to avoid the higher prices once the tariffs came into play. So the way basic, GDP accounting works is you net out the imports that were brought into a country from GDP. Well, in following months, after the stocking up has taken place,
it's going to go down.
It'll go down, and so you'll see an adjustment of the numbers in terms of GDP growth. But what's clear is U.S. companies are postponing investments because there's so much chaos in the tariff policy, and that must lead to some slowdown in economic growth.
Yeah, I mean, that again, if America sneezes economically, the rest of the world gets a cold. We know that's certainly an issue. Let's talk about a trade deal. We spoke to Seb Gorka, a senior advisor to the president earlier the week, who's talking about Britain being, I think we eased it out of him, something in the region of the top 10 countries in the queue for a deal, the trade deal. But now we're told that UK trade deal could be put on the back burner. Big concern about the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer looking to sort of reset relations with the EU, possibly tie ourselves in with what's called dynamic alignment on rules with the EU, and that would make it much harder to do a deal with the US. Do you think that we are likely to get that deal or not?
Well, first of all, based on my experience and having been involved with some free trade or trade negotiations, it's impossible in terms of staffing to do 70 deals.
I think they're talking about 100 countries have been in talks.
Or 100. Impossible. It's so hard to do one. So you want to be in the top 10. But I think inside the bureaucracies, they'll be looking for pretexts or reasons to say, let's put this one on the back burner because, Mr. President, you've got these other priorities. Yeah. So I think that is a risk. But, as we talked about before on your lovely show, the UK is beloved in the United States. Every president loves the UK. So they're going to want to do something in principle. But none of these agreements are going to be real free trade agreements. They're going to be agreements on basic.
Here's my rule. You don't get to come and see the king unless we get a trade deal. Simple as that. Matthew Price, great to talk to you. Thank you so much. Former White House official. Philip Ingram listening to that. Apparently we've got a lovely show. Or
well, we have, yes, of course. But I would say that anyway.
Do you think we'll get a trade deal? Do you think? Does
it matter? I think we'll get something. Does it really matter? Yes and no.
We still trade. You don't need a trade deal to trade.
We're still trading.
Well, we don't want those 10% tariffs.
The costs are up slightly for UK companies, but is that going to have a massive impact?
25% for some manufacturers, cars.
The cars and steel industry is particularly badly hit.
Yeah. Well, we shall wait and see. All to come to play for. Plenty more coming up. Coming up to the midday news. After that, we're going to be talking to Mark Littlewood. Lots more top guests. Do stay tuned. This is, of course, Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. This beautiful, sweltering hot day. I hope you're enjoying yourself, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio in the garden, on your smart speaker, or watching on YouTube or your connected device. It's great to have your company. Still joining me also, Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. Thank you once again for your time. Coming up in this hour, I'm going to talk more about net zero policies. They've been, absolutely defining for not just our energy policy, our economic policy, our defence policy, absolutely crucial. And more in the news. We only had Tony Blair yesterday criticising net zero policy as basically pretty much unworkable. Well, Labour's biggest union backer, that's the Unite Union, has now joined the GMB union, basically saying this is a political millstone around the country, around the Labour Party's neck. This amid growing unrest over the green agenda. Also, interestingly, Keir Starmer yesterday failing to guarantee net zero Secretary Miliband's job. Plus, we're going to be talking more about Ghanaian asylum seeker who has won absurdly, outrageously, immorally a human rights claim to remain in the UK after he argued that he's too traumatised by getting COVID when he was here, illegally by the way, didn't have any right to be here, to return to his home country where they don't have quite good healthcare as us. Amazing, we found a country that doesn't have as good healthcare as us, but there we are. Also, Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood has said it's absolutely unacceptable to question the validity of the Supreme Court after the judges at the court ruled late last month that the term woman is defined by biological sex. Also, the news today that the Football Association in England is going to follow suit from this Scottish FA, and they will be, as of June, banning men who identify as if they are women but nevertheless are men from competing in the women's game. Transgender athletes will be banned from women's football. Well, again, only transgender athletes who aren't actually women. Let's be very clear about this. Plus, also, it's now been more than a week of chaos since Marks & Spencer's, one of UK's biggest high street brands, had a significant cyber attack with online systems still not back up and running. So what happened and how do businesses deal with these online cyber attacks? That's all coming up. Plenty more besides. As I say, Philip Ingram is with me. And we're going to go to our top guest in just a couple of moments. But it is very interesting today. Like with local election day, we've got the Runcorn by-election. We're not allowed, broadcasters aren't allowed to talk about this stuff at all, quite rightly. The Ofcom rules I actually agree with during the elections, but we are still allowed to talk about politics. And there's no doubt at all that net zero is a political issue. It was they tried to put it as a sort of a very much a sort of a moral issue, like, don't you care about the children and the planet? But more and more and more, and I've always argued it's an immoral policy for people, particularly on lower incomes in the UK, but also particularly for people living in third world countries, developing countries who desperately need fossil fuels to be able to industrialise their countries and live a quality of life that we have in this country. Maybe then they wouldn't all come and seek asylum over here. There's just a thought. We'll link on to that. All these stories are linked, are they not? But are you surprised that so many more people are now coming out? Tony Blair this week saying he's not opposed to net zero, it's just the implementation of the policy. Labour's biggest backer, Unite, GMB, another big union backer, both say we're not opposed to the policy. Oh, we all care about climate change. I don't think they really do, in the sense of what the green, eco-activists care about it, but saying it's the implementation of the policy. Do you think that we have reached a turning point in the road and the reality has hit that this policy just simply is untenable now?
I think we're beginning to get that realisation, and this is where I think individuals and some of the groups, the unions, are realising that from a UK perspective, even if you believed all of that, the hype around climate change, there's no point in us doing something completely different and shooting ourselves in the foot economically if the rest of the world isn't coming along.
And that's the argument Tony Blair gave. But I would go further and just say that the policy is unachievable, unaffordable, and frankly insane.
Well, yes, but it gives an excuse to change technologies. It gives an excuse to advance in certain areas. But what people have done is they've jumped on a soundbite, and they're using that soundbite and they're trying to make the science then fit the soundbite, rather than look at something that is just a development and a movement forward in technology. Because it is lovely wandering around London now without the diesel fumes coming out of the buses and the taxis and everything else, because they're now electrified. Now, is that net zero?
We've just
or is
pushed that pollution elsewhere. I'm happy to not have it in the middle of towns and cities.
Exactly.
But we're constantly told by Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, looking out the window, that this terrible pollution is killing everybody, even though, of course, the air quality in London, like every city in this country, is cleaner than it's ever been. But it's not to do with you, Les, and these sort of policies. It's been it's been getting cleaner for 100 years.
Yes, but it's killing the families and the children in China who are making the EV batteries and all the electronics and all the rest of it. You're right. It's just pushing the problem somewhere else.
Yeah, indeed. Well, look, we'll talk about all this more. I'd love to hear from you. Get in touch about particularly the biggest union backers for Labour, saying that these job losses aren't worth this policy. What's your reaction? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate, and text costs one standard network rate message. But also, I'd love to hear from you about that breaking news this morning from the English FA that trans-identified men who think that they all claim that they are women are no longer going to be allowed to play in the women's game, because basically they're not women. It's that simple. A bit of sanity emerging on lots of fronts, eh? Love to hear your thoughts on that and everything else besides, including that Ukraine-US mineral deal as well. Do you think that could be the start of some sort of security guarantee for Ukraine nearing the end of the war? We'll talk about all of that coming up. Right now, let's talk to my next guest. He's Director of Popular Conservatism, and he's Mark Littlewood. A very good afternoon to you, Mark.
Good afternoon, Julia. Good to be with you.
Well, look, let's start with this net zero story. And it comes on the day that we announced that we've seen the announcement from the government that solar panels will be required to be built on all new homes as part of Labour's net zero push. I mean, I don't really have a problem with all new homes having solar panels, as long as, I think, they all have to have heat pumps as well. I don't think that's going to work out quite as well for people when they don't actually heat people's homes as they need in the winter. But do you think this is the beginning of the end of net zero policies for every party?
It's unraveling pretty fast. Obviously, Ed Miliband remains a true believer. I suspect that the government will continue to pretend that it's heading towards net zero, whilst not actually being willing, quite rightly, to embrace the policies that would get us there. Yeah. By the way, Julia, I'm not in favour of mandates to put solar panels on houses or to have heat pumps or anything else. I'm confident that over the due course of time, but in an unpredictable way, technology will solve this problem.
I'm with you.
In 100 or 200 years' time, we're not going to be reliant on petrol or fossil fuels particularly. They will be a redundant sort of fuel source. A bit like coal is not a major part of our fuel mix now. But what I don't want is the government pretending that they've worked out what technology it will be. Yeah. Maybe it's solar. Maybe it's wind, maybe it's better small modular nuclear reactors, maybe it's shale gas, maybe it's a technology we haven't thought of yet, maybe somebody will eventually crack nuclear fusion. Let the market decide this, not some housing minister giving mandates.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that. And again, I'm always fascinated by the sort of green lobby's lack of faith in human ingenuity and technology when what's happened since the Industrial Revolution onwards has been one amazing big miracle of human ingenuity and technology. Our ability to solve problems is what makes human beings unique in the animal world. And yet, uniquely on this, no, can't solve it. No, we're the victim of the planet. We just have to go backwards and go back. I mean, and again, people need to understand this is what it means. It means rolling back the Industrial Revolution. It doesn't mean suddenly living in this green revolution where everything's going to be lovely and nice, and but we're not going to have fossil fuels. It means not having reliable fuel, and that means not having heating and electricity, being able to get on a plane, being able to drive a car, being able to have abundant food, being able to have medicine. People need to understand what it actually means.
Yeah. I mean, what particularly irks me as well, Julia, is that if reducing carbon emissions is, one of your top priorities, one of your key things you care about, well, we've made unbelievable progress.
Yeah.
I mean, we have more than halved carbon emissions since the 1990s. You might sort of understand the hardcore greenies if, I don't know, carbon emissions in Britain had doubled or trebled.
But wait a minute, we partly did that by, if you make energy so expensive and planning so difficult that you actually, and regulation on companies so much, that actually people take their manufacturing overseas and they close down their factories. It's amazing how much much less fossil fuel you need. I mean, we basically, if you deindustrialise, you decarbonise.
Sure. But therefore, I would find it more rational if you had coal miners and oil workers throwing things over paintings in art galleries and blocking the road, because things are going against them. I don't understand why the Greens are complaining. Everything has gone in their direction enormously.
Well, Just Stop Oil say they've achieved all of their aims.
Yeah, quite. So what these people are protesting about, it should be people who work in fossil fuel industries who should be screaming mad about them losing their livelihood. So we've got everything back to front. And look, if I could click my fingers and for absolutely no cost get Britain to carbon net zero by 2050, I'd probably do it. I mean, I think it would have almost no impact on either our domestic or the global climate, but I'd do it if I could do it at the click of my fingers. But we can't. It will cost an absolute fortune. It will bankrupt the economy to get there. And again, for no real discernible benefit. We're only 1% of all carbon emissions. That's going to continue to fall. But let's do it slowly, methodically, and through free market technology, not through government.
And again, people didn't abandon the horse and cart before the car was invented. This is that's the equivalent. That's right. This is the equivalent policy, right? We think there'll be a better technology. We haven't got it yet. But you're being banned from using your horse and cart. No, people abandoned horse and carts because they were cars and they were better. And weirdly, you didn't have to have laws or taxes to persuade people to move to cars because they were better.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, the other great story there is it's another great story about the unpredictability of technological breakthroughs. So Henry Ford was fond of saying, if he'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, not a car. And he nevertheless invented a car. Nobody knew that transportation of human beings was going to move in that direction. And then the car's invented and becomes mainstream quite quickly. And I suspect that energy technology will be rather similar. We don't know what's coming next.
I am, as my husband so lovingly points out, approaching my late 50s on a birthday tomorrow. Thanks, husband. And I can remember watching things like Tomorrow's World when we were absolutely convinced, but by this time we were going to be in the flying cars. So the whole thing has been a disappointment to me, but there we are. Look, let's talk about, there's been question marks about Ed Miliband's future because of net zero policy. Again, I don't know why people complain about Ed Miliband. It's Keir Starmer's policy and it's the whole Labour Party, Liberal Democrats, Greens and Conservatives until about 3 minutes ago were all signed up to this. Reform Party, the only party not signed up to it for a long time. But question marks also about Rachel Reeves' future in government as well. And again, Prime Minister wouldn't confirm Ed Miliband would be staying in government. Latest question marks over Rachel Reeves, though, relate to an investigation by the sleaze watchdog. This is for the government. This is into her failure to declare Christmas theatre ticket freebies worth £276. The Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, Daniel Greenberg, has launched an official investigation over her failure to declare them on time. Now, I mean, this isn't the biggest area of sleaze in the world, but MPs are required to declare any freebies they get. But I think most people are just concerned about why is everyone offering all these MPs and these ministers so many freebies?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to do something a little bit out of character here. I think I'm going to leap to the defence of Labour politicians.
I'm with you on this.
I mean, obviously, Rachel Reeves should have the staff be able to fill in the form properly. I mean, this is just pathetic.
Well, she didn't know her own CV, darling. So, I mean,
yeah, well, quite. But, I mean, someone somewhere should be able to actually get the form in on time. And it is important, I think, that MPs' expenses and treats are known in the public domain. But I have to say, unless we want our politicians to be even more detached from reality, I don't have a problem, per se, with a business or an interest group or a think tank or anybody else who wants to put their views forward saying, look, we'd really like to meet the Chancellor of the Exchequer or the Transport Secretary or the Energy Secretary. You know, how about coming along to this football match, this theatre event, this dinner with us? so we can, have a nice evening and a good chat. Are we
yeah,
really
but
going
then
to say
only
that politicians shouldn't be able to do
the
that?
people who can offer a freebie and who've got the money to be able to do that that are able to meet up with MPs. And
Well, in that case, we're going to ban anybody ever taking an MP out for dinner, are we? Because not everyone can afford to take an MP out to dinner.
Fair
I think
point.
we've got to be pretty realistic about this. And I want MPs to meet businesses. Now, whether the theatre's the right way, or a football match, or the opera, or just taking them out to dinner, I don't know. But I'm all in favour of that. I want access to politicians. The idea that they can never, be bought a cup of tea or a beer or be taken to the theatre or a football match without people screaming "Blue Murder is mad."
Okay.
What they should do is to be able to report it properly on time.
Yeah, again, it shouldn't be too much. You say we'd like to think she had the staff to do that. Look, you're a keen Brexiteer, same as me. I'm just wondering what you think about the possibilities of getting a US-UK trade deal. We're told earlier this week, we were told by Seb Gorka, a senior advisor to the president, that we could be in the top 10 of countries. And obviously, countries like India and China are ahead of us in the queue in terms of much bigger trade dealers. But now we were told we could be in the top 10. Now we could be on the back burner. Been US concerns that this attempt to reset our relationship with the EU by Keir Starmer, realigning ourselves with EU rules, could actually block a pact with the US. Are you concerned about that?
Yeah, it's the nature of it, really. Of course, in general, and certainly in recent weeks, everybody's been focusing on tariffs as a potential block to trade. But most of the problems really with trade are regulations. That, we ban your products over here because we think they're dangerous. You don't think our products over there are fit for purpose. It's usually a regulatory rule. So if you align yourselves with the EU in any way on regulations and sort of say, well, whatever new regulations come in from the EU, we'll abide by them, it makes a negotiation with the United States, or indeed anyone else, near impossible. Because rather than sitting down with the British regulatory rulebook and the American regulatory rulebook and saying, OK, what can we trade off? If you get rid of that one, we'll get rid of this one. You're locked in to the EU book, in which case the negotiations, I'm not going to say they can't get off the ground, but my God, they are hamstrung by right from the outset.
Yeah.
But I would say this in terms of the deal. I think we sometimes think as if two countries sit down and eventually, after a lot of blood, sweat and tears, produce a sort of 5,000-page document, which is the last word on trading relationships. Yeah. What you've actually got to do is to make incremental progress, one step at a time. I would like us to lower some tariffs on US products in return for them lowering tariffs on us. Yeah. Can we actually find a way in which our financial services industries can trade more easily, or our pharmaceutical industries? And you do one little bit at a time. You keep going back to the table and making small bits of progress, rather than having one gigantic document that sort of holds for the next 200 years. We've got to get a lot better at doing that. Countries like New Zealand and Singapore are great at it.
Well, we didn't have anyone
who... We gave away our trade policy for 50 years. We've lost our muscle memory on it.
Exactly, absolutely. We didn't have anyone able to do it. Just finally, I want to ask you about the latest madness of an asylum seeker in this country, given the right to stay here under the most spurious grounds by this. We're hearing so much about this upper-tier tribunal of the Immigration and Asylum Chamber. I think we need to sack every single judge in this tribunal automatically. We rehire based on their record. But this is a Ghanaian asylum seeker, Winfred Kwabla Dogby. He arrived here on a visa back in April 2013. He claimed asylum, presumably when his visa ran out in 2016. It was refused. He then lodged submission after submission. He then got COVID in 2020. He did suffer very seriously, had multiple organ failure. He has now told a tribunal that he has experienced post-COVID-19 syndrome and PTSD, and he was part of a rehabilitation program that would not be available to him if he went back to his home country of Ghana, so he couldn't be sent home. And they have agreed with him and allowed to let him stay. Basically, if we're going to allow anybody to stay in this country whose country doesn't have as good healthcare as us, we're looking at a couple of billion people who are going to come here, aren't we?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. What's extraordinary here is that everything this chap has said might be true, but it's not in any way germane to whether or not we should support him. Yeah, I would think the issue you've got to do is to have some pretty decent proof, or at least some pretty compelling evidence, if it falls short of proof, that if you were sent back, the government of your country would do real harm to you, that you could lose life.
Kill you, torture you, imprison you. Other than that, sorry.
The fact that their COVID-19 specialists aren't quite as good as the ones they've got used to in London or wherever they are, that may be true, but is an irrelevant consideration. So we need a much, much narrower definition. If we really think sending you back means we're sending you to your certain death or a certainty of torture or a great likelihood of it, fine. But if it's just that you prefer our healthcare system and you're a bit distressed about the one that you have back home, that might be true, but ain't our problem, ain't good enough, and should not be entertained by any immigration tribunal. Absolutely.
Mark Littlewood, Director of Public Conservatism. We covered a lot of ground there. Thank you very much. Philip Ingram, just on that case, the Ghanaian, we discussed it earlier in the show, but these cases are coming thick and fast. It's usually some spurious right to a family life, right to privacy life, using under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Utter nonsense, not balancing the interests of the country, the home country, there, either our safety from criminals or indeed just our rights. Like, we're taxpayers, we pay for healthcare. I don't know why my taxes are paying for healthcare for some Ghanaian bloke who's got no right to be in the country with us since 2016. I don't know why he gets a single penny of my money.
Well, it shouldn't be in the same way that an Albanian criminal whose child doesn't like Albanian chicken nuggets as opposed to British chicken nuggets.
How does he even know?
Well, exactly. Well, because they go on holiday back home to Albania to come back here again.
Or the paedophile whose children would be seriously damaged by the fact that they wouldn't have him. I mean, I'm thinking...
When he's not allowed to see them anyway as part of his...
Yeah.
No, it's crazy.
But it's not this. These aren't one-offs, and we're often told, "Oh, come on, these are silly one-offs." They're not.
They're consistent craziness.
Consistent. The problem isn't even if you actually read Article 8, which often these come under the European Convention on Human Rights. It's actually perfectly reasonable. You have a right to a family life, to a private life. Unless, I mean, it's got 2 paragraphs, and it's almost like these tribunal judges haven't read the second half.
Yeah. No, it's
the risk to other people, whether you are conducive to the public good. No, me paying for your health care is not conducive to the public good.
Well, it's complete madness, and maybe our ministers should be going out and having their meals with their judges and trying to educate them on what's good for the UK. Instead of going for theatre tickets or concert tickets or football boxes or getting free clothes.
Tell you what, a lot of my family are Arsenal fans. Trying to get to that Arsenal semi-final, the European Championship semi-final, Champions League semi-final. Very, very, very hard to get tickets for that. No, Keir Starmer, guaranteed in the box every single time. Got to be a bonus to being PMA. I'd love to hear from you. Do get in touch on any of the topics we're talking about, particularly that net zero topic. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that Ghanaian asylum seeker, on the Football Association's decision to basically madly ban men from playing in the women's game. Because men, whether they think they're women or identify as women, can play in the men's game because they're men. We'll talk about that coming up as well. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
to bow down to dangerous DEI policies. I am concerned, and I will say the vast majority of the people in the core and the armed forces, and probably in all sectors of public life in the United Kingdom, are concerned that this political push will lead to underqualified people being pushed into high up positions where they could cause injuries and deaths. And that's what this whole situation is about.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. It's 12:27. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still here as well. Let's get some of your messages coming in about net zero. I know we've got a call up about Rachel Reeves and her freebies. Yasmin says on net zero, and Labour's biggest union backers basically attacking the government's net zero policies over job losses in particular. Yasmin says, I'm sorry, but there's going to come a time when our government wakes up and announces that it's scrapping net zero. Too much time, money and jobs have been wasted achieving a target which is pure ideology and no common sense. Except I think I agree with Philip on this earlier, as you said earlier, that they won't say we're scrapping it. It would just, again, everything just gradually gets pushed back and then just quietly goes into the long grass. Humphrey says, it looks like we're about to enter yet another Labour civil war. Tony Blair v Red Ed. I think we know who's going to win that one. Oh, do we, though? I mean, you know. Diana says people will no longer be bullied and cheated. And Christopher says, ha, is this the first time I've ever agreed with the unions? Crazy times, he says. And Peter says it's time for Red Ed and Rachel from Accounts to give up the zealot dream of net zero. I don't think anyone working in the Treasury could agree with net zero. They'd be mad, wouldn't they? Linda says when activists get into power, common sense goes out of the window. And James says, let's not forget, neither Labour nor Tories had a mandate for this stuff. Quite right. Yep. Just voted through, waved through in Parliament. The final act of a failed Prime Minister in Theresa May. I mean, Labour had done a lot of it beforehand, but the Tories definitely, put coal on the fire. Did they not? Probably not coal. They put I don't know. They put a magnifying glass from a solar panel on the fire. Let's go to the phone lines. Dave is on the line and he's in London. Dave, you wanted to talk about that Rachel Reeves freebie, and there's a sleaze investigation that basically she took a freebie to go to the theatre before Christmas, cost a few £100, didn't declare it in time, and now everyone's got their knickers in a twist.
Yeah, I don't think we need to get our knickers in a twist. I think this is probably a good thing for the politicians, actually. I mean, 2 tickets to the Christmas panto is not exactly the bribe of the century. And it might do them all a favour, because if I was a politician and I get asked to go to some of these things and I think, oh, crikey, really? I do not want to go to the Christmas panto. I can kind of easily now go, yeah, can't really do that, you know, I've got to declare it, I've got to pay tax on it.
Yeah.
But it's more about the tax, actually, than it is the bribe, because, as you know, in business, if you take these things, there's a thin line between it being a benefit in kind and, and not. So it's probably more about the tax, but I think 2 tickets for the Christmas panto, I would want to be paid to go to that rather than seeing it as a bribe.
I'm trying to find the notes whether it was actually a panto, but some play before Christmas. I've got to be honest with you. I didn't read the story in too much depth because it wasn't something that really bothered me. And again, I am bothered about Boris Johnson and Kate because, you know, he was having rules that meant that we weren't allowed to meet up together, and his staff were basically having a wild party every Friday night over all those months. But you don't think it's an issue. But I think a lot of people working the police have always said it's very weird that the rules are different for police as they are for politicians, where it would be considered as corruption or a bribe for the police, but not for politicians, even though they've got actually in lots of ways a lot more power.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that politicians seem to be able to get away with. Let's take expenses as well, right? Claiming for second homes and all this kind of stuff. Again, you can't do that in business. So I think there's far bigger. I think many years ago, when people were saying, "Oh, this Labour politician's salary is only 75,000," but then they worked out what her equivalent salary was as benefit in kind with all the claims, and it was nearly 400,000.
Well, no, that's not true, because with the expenses and everything, those are actually largely for office expenses, which you know, they run their small business, they're funded, you know, their secretaries and their photocopiers and their office hire. That's not a benefit to them, and also they are required to have a second home. I mean, apart from the ones who are doing the old dodgy, they've got a home somewhere in the outskirts of London and then rent another another one at the inside. I mean, that's not on. Dave, appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Let's go to Bob, who's in Cambridge. Now, Bob, you wanted to talk about that story we talked about a bit earlier, and this is a senior figure in the Muslim Association of Britain who has basically said that the May the 7th massacre was a lie.
Absolutely. It's beyond belief that they can even think that. I mean, I remember when you at a previous programme you said that that you read the first line of Douglas Murray's fantastic book that I've just started reading.
Oh, it's brilliant, isn't it?
Sometimes a flare goes up, and you get to see exactly where everyone is standing. I mean, that's just so hard hitting, so poignant.
Yeah.
And I read this really encompasses what you're saying about the denial, the overwhelming denial that it ever happened. Further on in the introduction in his book, where it says about the gulf between peace and war is probably the most stark divide that any person in society can face.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to quote Leo Tolstoy, the description of armies about to clash. But then he really, what really brings it home is when he says, when the realm of war comes into someone's daily life, it is another level of terror.
Yeah.
And the novel by Ian McEwan, in which a child is abducted from a supermarket, and when the parent realises what has happened, he first thinks there must have been some mistake.
Yeah.
Then he realises that his child is missing. He starts to shout for help. The first reaction of other people shopping is alarm that a man is behaving like this. Then suddenly, as though a layer of glass surrounding them is suddenly shattered, everybody enters into the realm that the man is in.
Yeah.
A child is missing, and everybody in the vicinity is now in this new transformed reality. But this is where it's just a stark contrast. In Israel, on the 7th, dozens of children were stolen and murdered, yet a world that seemed incapable of knowing right from wrong.
You can't read the whole book. I'm sure it's probably got some sort of copyright on it. Apologies to Douglas Murray and HarperCollins for that. Listen, I'm going to have to leave that there, Bob. But yeah, I think you're right. Again, when you've got people in this country who are saying things that are blatantly untrue. I think I said May the 7th, October 7th massacre, of course, he's responding to. Thank you for that. Philip Ingram, just your response to that. Again, the fact that we have so many people in this country and leading figures supposedly claiming to be representing Muslims. We don't know whether they do or not, but some of that polling, which Jake Wallace-Simons quoted earlier, but where, you've got people who 3/4 of Muslims in this country, apparently thinking, October the 7th massacre didn't really happen. Against all the evidence. That is very scary.
It's very scary indeed. And the fact that this polling's been published and we can't get the detail behind it and understand where it's come from and put it into context, I don't think that's right. I don't think any right-minded person, whether they're Muslims or Christians or Jews or from whatever faith...
Can't make up your own facts.
Yeah, they don't make up their own facts.
Well, talking about own facts, up next we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be talking about the many businesses and organisations, public sector and others, who think they can make up their own laws and their own facts when it comes to trans women, trans-identified men and their right to be in women's only spaces, despite that Supreme Court ruling just a couple of weeks ago. We're going to be talking to James Esses about that, also about the Football Association in England finally announcing that as of June there will be no men playing in the women's game. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:37 is the time. Philip Ingram's still with me. Coming up in the next 20 minutes or so before Ian Collins comes in to tell us what's happening on his show this afternoon. We are going to be talking about the M&S cyber attack to find out, well, what on earth has happened and why is it still not resolved? Right now, though, let's talk about, well, why the Supreme Court decision on whether or not women were biologically defined or not doesn't seem to have finally put paid to that debate. Well, let's talk about that with James S. He's a psychotherapist and founder of Just Therapy. A very good afternoon to you, James.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you very much. Now, I want to get on to the number of organisations and public bodies and individuals saying, well, no, simply not abiding by the Supreme Court ruling. I want to get on to them. But some good news today, just after we came on air at 10 o'clock, the English Football Association has followed suit from the Scottish Football Association, indeed has gone further, banning what they call transgender women, meaning trans-identified men, from the women's football. That is from next season. So as of 1st of June, that's it. There will be no men playing in women's leagues. I mean, this is a welcome decision, isn't it? A bit of common sense returning.
Yes, an outbreak of common sense by the sounds of it. And I've seen that Netball England have quickly followed suit. And I'm also told that the cricket body might well follow suit over the coming days. So this is all very positive. You know, at the same time, I do reflect even on the language that's used by the bodies. I mean, I looked at the statement put out by the FA. It's all very meek and quite apologetic.
We were trying to be, you know, inclusive, all that.
Indeed, and actually, I'd like it if these organisations could own it a bit more. At the end of the day, they're doing this both out of a sense of justice and fairness, and also because it reflects biological reality. There's absolutely nothing for them to be apologetic about whatsoever, although I've seen already the hysteria that's come out. I've seen people saying in light of this announcement that we're essentially creating a form of apartheid. So the madness is.
But they're all no. But there wasn't apartheid. It was between men and women, and there was a reason for that. It was because it's the same reason that men don't have hysterectomies and women don't get checked for their prostate. It's because men and women are biologically different, and there was a reason why they decided to set up categories for women's sport that are separate from men's sport, and that reason being that men have a huge physical advantage. They're bigger, they are taller, they are stronger, they have better muscle, higher muscle percentage, and also testosterone itself, whether you're playing chess or playing football, plays a role in the competitiveness. Women basically can't beat men, average woman, average man, even the elite woman, elite man. They cannot beat men because of that biological difference. So there was a reason why we had women's sport in the first place. So all we are doing is re-establishing that. Yeah, it's apartheid, but it's justified.
Well, look, look, it's no discredit to women. We're just reflecting in natural advantages, disadvantages between the sex. But nobody is going to be prevented from playing sport over this. Okay, so those people saying you're preventing trans people from getting fit and having exercise and playing sport in the playground, absolute nonsense. People can play sport, but as it always should have been, sex segregated.
Yeah, and indeed, a lot of girls and women were very worried about competing in sport, both at school, and local county competitions, and in football, because of being forced to play against men who were a risk to them, boys and men who are much, much bigger than them and stronger than them. We have seen injuries, haven't we?
We have. We've seen injustice, we've seen unfair outcomes, we've seen injuries as well. I'm glad that these bodies are starting to take notice. But again, there's certain inconsistency. We need a consistent approach, not just in this country, but across the entire world. It makes no sense that in certain countries men can play in women's football and others they can't. We need to restore global common sense, but still, this is very welcome.
Yeah, but it's all been led by America and Britain. So I think, certainly with Donald Trump and his rulings on female and male identity and your passport matching your actual sex, and the head of the US Olympics, I think things may move forward there. In terms of what's happened here since the Supreme Court ruling, a big victory for women's rights activists and for women's safety and simple fairness and, frankly, sanity. But the Justice Secretary, Shabazz Shabana Mahmood. She was speaking to the Parliament's Human Rights Joint Committee the other day, and she said it's absolutely unacceptable for people to question the validity of the Supreme Court after the ruling that the term woman is defined by biological sex. Said it provided the legal clarity in their legal decision, which is exactly their job. Now, the government said they have accepted this ruling. Keir Starmer apparently has changed his views that he had only 2 years ago about whether trans women were women or not. But an awful lot of organisations and bodies simply have not accepted that ruling, and the clear clarification, not a change in the law, but clarification of what the law not only is now, but has always been since the Equality Act of 2010, and therefore changing their policies on various issues in terms of where trans people are allowed to enter into women's single-sex spaces. You've been on social media, done a fantastic job, I have to say, I salute you for this, basically putting together a list of all the organisations, public sector bodies, charities and others that are simply refusing to accept this ruling. Give us a clue of the range of organisations who've basically said, nah, we're not going to obey the law.
Well, the term diversity is thrown about, and the only thing diverse is the range of organisations who seemingly view the Supreme Court with complete and utter animosity. So it's ranged from Girl Guides to various NHS trusts, police forces, children's charities, gyms, coming out en masse, writing to their staff members saying that they stand in solidarity with the LGBT community, that they won't make any changes to their policies, that men will be entitled to continue using female spaces and toilets, etc. It's really quite concerning that if they're not willing to follow the highest court in the land. But this, Julia, is why, unfortunately, whilst the Supreme Court judgment was welcome, it simply was not enough. We need legislative change in this country. The Gender Recognition Act needs to be repealed. The Equality Act needs to be amended. I cannot see it happening under this government, but it needs to happen if we're going to restore common sense and sanity to this country.
And this is where you've got the Gender Recognition Act from 2004, I think, against the Equality Act 2010. And the 2010 Act makes it very clear there are single-sex spaces and men are not allowed into women's single-sex spaces for a very good reason. But the Gender Recognition Act basically gave men and women, legal status, a document. They could go back, they could change their passport, their driving licence, every document, including their birth certificate, which I've always been really struggled with that idea. You can't change the past, the reality of their birth. But that somehow that legal acquisition of the term, being a woman, somehow did in reality change their biological sex. Obvious to anyone with half a brain that is not the case, but the law and many of these organisations had been basically playing along with this. But these bodies, it's all very well, say Girl Guides, basically saying, no, we're not going to tell parents, we don't have any duty to do so, we're going to allow your girls to come along on us on a trip away at the weekend in a tent or in a room, and we're going to put a boy who claims he thinks he's a girl in the same room, a teenage boy, and there's nothing you can do about it. But that's not true, is it? Because there's absolutely something we can do about it. We need to legally challenge every single one of these organisations, don't we?
We do, and we need to vote with our feet as well at the end of the day. If boycotts is what it takes, then so be it. But it's actually the sheer hypocrisy. I mean, Jolyon Morm of the Good Law Project, or as I call him, the patron saint of lost causes, he previously put out a statement around the fact that Supreme Court judgments must always be respected and adhered to. But on this occasion, because he doesn't like it, he's called into question the entire ethics of the Supreme Court. And I've seen others off the back of that referring to the Supreme Court justices as bigots and fascists. So
of course they are. Of course they are. Transphobes, just like of course they think J.K. Rowling is as well. I mean, this is the extraordinary thing. It's just they group again. If the Supreme Court judgment had gone against the For Women Scotland and Sex Matters and others, I would have said, well, that's what there is. We're going to have to challenge it elsewhere in Parliament and elsewhere. But I would accept that was what they said. But it wouldn't in any way have changed my view. I found it fascinating that Keir Starmer and many others apparently have completely changed their view now on these things. But it's very important, as you say. I think boycotts are going to be the answer. Legal challenge is the answer. What do you make of the abject madness of the likes of the Harry Potter actors, the latest lot of Harry Potter actors, who've signed a trans pledge? I think there's about 600 of the great and the good who signed a trans pledge after the Supreme Court ruling, and basically it's all against J.K. Rowling. An open letter pledging their solidarity with the LGBT community includes Eddie Redmayne, brilliant Oscar-winning actor who appeared in a Fantastic Beasts film. Katie Leung, who played Cho Chang in Harry Potter. It's 400 stars in total, but they have raised concerns about the impact of the Supreme Court ruling on biological sex. Look, this follows a load of the Harry Potter stars who basically made their fortunes and their careers thanks to J.K. Rowling turning on her, accusing her of something which she's never done, which is actually say anything ever remotely transphobic. She's only ever stood up for women's safety and women's rights. What do you make of these lovies, the great and the good in the music, in the theatre, music and cinema world, turning on the Supreme Court judgment and indeed J.K. Rowling?
Well, it's part of the course, really. I mean, it's interesting what a high proportion of Harry Potter actors seem to come out support of this, possibly because they believe in magic and things that simply are not real. But in fact, I got called a fascist the other day by a chap called Sean Biggerstaff, who was the Quidditch captain. I think he features in the films for about a total of 40 seconds.
Well done him.
Yes, good on him indeed. Yes, as you say, look, these people are happy to use J.K. Rowling's work, stardom, etc., to rise to fame. And then inevitably, for some of them, like this Sean Biggerstaff fella who hasn't done too well in his career, he wants to still create a name for himself. And what better way to do it than align himself with this kind of campaign? So I think the whole thing is very, very disingenuous indeed.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad enough the actors who have to keep silent because they'll lose work in that world if they speak out and sort of talk biological fact and sense. But it's one thing to actually sort of join in the pile-on and pretend it's because they're being kind and nice. You've done such fantastic work on this. I really, really applaud you. Thank you very much. Do get in touch with Joe Messis on social media. He's on X, compiling a list of your organisation. You can get in touch with them anonymously. If your organisation is basically saying we're not going to obey the Supreme Court ruling, get in touch with him because he's compiling that list. James S. is psychotherapist and founder at Just Therapy. Philip Ingram, your response to this, because I mean, you're a former senior military intelligence officer. You have to obey the law. Are these organisations not going to obey the law?
Well, yeah, it's ridiculous, and I agree that they have to be challenged. They have to be put in their place. The law's quite clear. It has been clear the whole way through from those who can apply logic. The Supreme Court has just clarified what the law has always been for those, like the Prime Minister, who were confused.
Confused, exactly. But again, it keeps being down to ordinary women.
Yeah.
Who are having to put together, crowdfund these cases.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be down to that. The government needs to act as well.
It shouldn't be. The government needs to come in and take this on.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk about something. I'm sure you'll have something input on this, Philip. That M&S cyber attack's been going on for a week. Absolute chaos. Website orders down. What is going on and how on earth do businesses guard against these sort of ransomware cyber attacks? We'll be talking to tech journalist and expert on this, Guy Cocker, up next. This is Talk.
But we thought, I suppose we probably shouldn't be this naive now, that this would somehow galvanise the Scottish government, you know, that they would hold up their hands and say, you know, OK, we apologise, we got this wrong and we're going to fix it.
Yeah.
Of course, that's not what's happened. So the government have set out, really, they're using the EHRC as like a deflector shield at the moment.
Yeah.
They can't do anything until they're the regulator of the law in this area, that they can't do anything until they get advanced guidance from them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:51 is the time. Julia Hartley-Brewer is my name. Philip Ingram is his name. Let's welcome our next guest, tech journalist Guy Cocker, to talk about this week-long now attack on M&S. Marks & Spencer, one of the biggest known brands in the UK, suffering from a whole week of chaos online thanks to some sort of cyber attack. Well, Guy Cocker, I suppose the first question is, what is this cyber attack? Who's done it as far as we know? What is it actually affected?
Well, it's difficult to know. I'm sorry. Hi, Julia. It's difficult to know because Marks & Spencer's has been kept quite stum on the matter. It's not really explained what's happened beyond the fact that they can't take online orders, they're unable to take contactless payments, and there seems to be a lack of Percy Pigs on the shelves, which is a big issue for me personally. I love those sweets, but the belief from cyber experts is that a group called Scattered Spider, who are sort of English-speaking US, UK conglomerate of, quite frankly, teenagers, have put together this attack. What's not clear though is that this group, and again, it's known under different pseudonyms. Yeah. It's a multinational. It's essentially a crime operation, has put in ransom attacks before, right. But it doesn't appear as though that's the case with Marks & Spencer.
So we're not sure what the motive is, because there's sometimes the motive is, I mean, and this happens to businesses all the time, like, you have to end up paying in Bitcoin, we've sealed all your computers, you can't get anything, we're going to take it all down and you've got a deadline, pay up. And whatever the ransom is, it's usually a lot cheaper than losing all your data and getting, not having a company running. But sometimes these attacks are kind of just for kicks, aren't they? Aren't they just sort of look what I can do, I'm responsible?
Exactly, yeah. Some of them can be. Some groups want to sort of show off their technical prowess and the fact that they can bring down a huge business like Marks & Spencer, who has lost about 7% of its value on the stock market, about 600 million in the last week. As you said, they haven't been able to take online orders for the last week. They've had staff that are waiting in the wings. Their agency workers haven't been working because they haven't been taking orders, and that's been losing them.
Yeah, but lots of people, their pensions will be, have shares in M&S. This is affecting a lot more people than than anyone working at M&S.
Yeah, and I should say Marks & Spencer's been doing very well on the stock market over the last 3 or 4 years. Yep. The executive Stuart Matchen's done a good job at turning that business around. But I think the feeling is this will be a short amount of pain. It shouldn't impact on that sort of great bastion of the British High Street and online that is Marks & Spencer's. And I think we all want to see that business continue to do well because it's something that we use and it is great.
Yeah, the trouble is though, I mean, it's taken so long. Often we hear about these cases, they have to rebuild and, there's been some sort of problem. They have to start, update all their systems. But it's been a week. Is that unusual for a business of this size to be hit for so long?
I mean, if we think back to attacks that have happened in the past with businesses like BA, where their systems have gone out, and then cybersecurity firms that have been like CrowdStrike was the big one from last year. I think even spoke about it. These businesses are paid millions to keep these sorts of businesses like retailers and service companies like BA to make sure that they're equipped for these sorts of attacks. And actually, this week alone, Co-op was attacked as well. But its systems, whatever cybersecurity systems it had in place, they were able to catch that attack and shut it down before it happened.
Presumably, they were on alert because of what happened to M&S. But this is the thing. Look, with BA, by the way, it's usually just their own computer system that's the problem rather than the cyber. They don't need a cyber attack to have a rubbish computer system. But the thing is, I mean, how do companies guard against this? Whether they are just, little local firm who get ransomware demands, and this happens all the time. And again, it's usually a sum which they can reasonably pay, you know, but to make it all go away. Or big multinational firms, or indeed we have the NHS got hit with a cyber attack a few years back as well. Sometimes these are from, you know, a hostile national, you know, government-backed actors. Sometimes they are terrorist groups. Sometimes they are just, you know, a bunch of teenagers doing it for kicks, or people or organised criminal networks. How could you possibly guard against this?
Well, there are multiple companies that are out there that you can hire. Obviously, you mentioned from the top, like a multinational like Marks and Spencer's, they'll spend millions on just making sure that their systems are as protected as they can be. The problem with this stuff is that there's always human error that's brought in. So a lot of these attacks can happen just because of weak passwords, or just an ex-employee, a disgruntled employee can be a weakness. So you can pay a lot of money to try and protect yourself, but ultimately,
one weak link. I mean, do you remember? I mean, we had that teenage hacker in the UK. He managed to get into the Defence Department and the Pentagon in the United States because some people working there, their password was quite literally password. I mean, extraordinary, but it does still happen. Tech journalist Guy Cocker, thank you very much indeed. Philip Ingram, look, you're a military intelligence officer in your career. What do you make of this? And
I do a lot of cyber stuff as well, and it's interesting.
Fingers in every pie, everyone.
This Scattered Spider group is not a small group. They've attacked MGM beforehand. They've attacked Caesar's Palace, and they tend to use phishing attacks. So it's trying to get you to click on a link that takes you will get something to infect your system. So they're a big organised crime group.
There's so much of this going on, even down to the AI that's being used, where people genuinely think they are speaking to and even looking at on a video call somebody who's authorised to make a payment. I know if people emails being my husband's in IT, emails being intercepted you in an email chain about a payment, and then the information is given. Someone literally sitting there watching it, intercepts, give different details. As far as you're concerned, you've made the payment. The other person goes, "Where's that payment?" It's disappeared. Exactly. It's all long gone.
80 to 90% of your protection can come in from getting your basics right. So educating people as to the threat, making sure you patch all your systems,
passwords and all of that,
and everything else. And then that last 10% is, as we heard, what you can buy in.
And if you're at the MOD, don't leave things at bus stops.
Exactly.
Top tip. I don't know. Anyway, at 12:58 is the time. Ian Collins is here. Have you ever been hacked?
I've never been hacked, but I've been sort of I could be hacked because my other half, who I have these passwords that are quite
what's happening.
They're quite convoluted, the passwords.
Yeah.
But they're generated by the app.
Yes.
So I don't pick the password. And her advice to me is make it something really simple. It's like...
Well, no, it's got to be simple. That's got nothing to do with you, so no one could ever guess it.
But I don't think she cares about
passwords are something of a battle in our household, I have to say.
Are they?
Yes,
because
my husband's in IT, and therefore,
You've got to convolute the password.
I hate all this
5,000 symbols and letters.
Yeah, exactly.
Jumbled up like a good one.